Meeting. As folks probably saw in the agenda, we did convene our meeting at 5:30 and then went into executive session. We're now out of executive session and public session. Because no one was here at the beginning of the meeting, I am going to ask now that if folks are able, if they could please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. So first on our agenda is a Veteran of the Year presentation from our Veterans Advisory Board. I'll call up Mr. Tepper.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Appreciate you taking the time this evening to allow us to award this plaque and other citations to Paul Horgan. I'd first like to call up Senator Moore and ask him if he would like to say a word.
Thank you. Good evening.
Good evening.
Thank you. How you doing? Well, it's an honor to be here tonight. I think so often that, especially lately today, we see military conflicts and on television, and it's just casually it's spoken about so casually today. We really forget the horrors that some of our soldiers and veterans had really gone through and the sacrifices they made. And I want to thank the town and all the veterans who are here tonight for remembering the service and the sacrifices that their fellow veterans have made. And also, not just the sacrifices he's made when he was gone, but also his continuing support for the veterans who are here as they've come back. And that's another thing I think a lot of times people take for granted, all the benefits, educational, medical, everything that the veterans get. And it's really due to the activities of the veterans who have come back and fought for those benefits. So in recognition of all Paul's wonderful sacrifices, I have from the State Senate, be it known that the Massachusetts Senate hereby extends its congratulations to Paul Horgan in recognition of receiving the 2022 Westborough Veteran of the Year Award and for your many years of support and service to veterans and their families. And be it further known that the Massachusetts Senate extends its best wishes for your continued success, that this citation be duly signed by the President of the Senate and attested to and a copy thereof transmitted by the Clerk of the Senate. It's signed by the Senate President, Karen Spilka, also Senator Eldridge, who was not able to make it here tonight, and myself, and congratulations, and thank you for all your sacrifices, and thank your family for their sacrifices also. Thank you very much.
Yeah, Paul, if you want to stay up, we've got more for you.
Yes, indeed. Next, I'd like to ask Representative Hannah Kane if she'd like to come.
Thank you, Jim. Good evening, everyone.
Hello.
Good to see you all tonight. Very happy to be here. I've gotten to know Paul over the years of having the pleasure of being part of the Westborough community, and I was very happy to see that you are going to be honored tonight. I think the hallmark of Westborough is that we ensure our veterans know how much you mean to us, how much we understand the service and sacrifice. And it's really important to have opportunities like this to come together and to publicly acknowledge the fact that not only did you serve our nation, but you've continued to serve in our community, and to make sure other veterans know the services that are offered and have opportunities to be part of the community. So I come here tonight with a citation from the House of Representatives, and I'd like to read it to you. It's be it hereby known to all that the Massachusetts House of Representatives offers its sincerest congratulations to Paul Horgan in recognition of receiving the Westborough Veteran of the Year Award. Thank you for your service in Vietnam and your years of dedication to veterans throughout the state, as well as your time chairing the Westborough Veterans Advisory Board. The entire membership extends its very best wishes and hope for your future good fortune and your continued success in all of your life endeavors, including hopefully a lot of rest and relaxation at this point in life. And it is signed by the Speaker of the House and myself and Representative Danielle Gregoire. And we're very thankful for all that you've done, sir. Thank you.
Thank you very much. a pile of these, Paul? Is that me? My announcement. Ian,
Yes.
would you like to confirm?
I would love to, and I just want to introduce this, and Paul, thank you so much, as I think all of us on the board who've come to know and appreciate you and all you've done. I'd say the adjectives that we look at is someone who's passionate, compassionate, and soft-spoken. So, but gets the job done. And you are always there, always helping out your fellow veterans, and celebrating all that they do. And we thank you for that. But just helping out in your community. And you're really somebody that folks look up to, both veterans and non-veterans. So thank you for that. And with that, we have a proclamation from the board that I'd like to read. Whereas Paul M. Horgan, a native of Massachusetts, grew up in the Boston area with 2 siblings. His father was a Boston police detective and mother a homemaker. And whereas Paul enlisted in the U.S. Army shortly after graduation from Boston College. During his military career, he attained the rank of Staff Sergeant, Second Lieutenant, and Captain. And whereas Paul, an undercover intelligence officer during the Vietnam War, learned to speak the Vietnamese language in 3 months while attending a specialized school in Monterey, California, in which classes were held for 8 hours per day in preparation for his duties while overseas. And whereas Paul was assigned to the 1st Cavalry Division Airmobile in 1967, he split his time being stationed in the jungle with the cavalry and then living in a small cement hut in a southern village where he forged connections with Vietnamese agents in order to help inform U.S. military operations. And whereas Paul's intelligence work included duties in Germany and Korea, he received several medals in his career, including the Bronze Star. And whereas Paul and his wife Patricia settled in Westborough for multiple decades, they raised 3 children, Sean, Susan, and Timothy, now have several grandchildren who can join us in acknowledging this very special occasion. And therefore, the Westborough Select Board does hereby confer this proclamation to Paul M. Horgan in recognition of his being named Veteran of the Year, given this 13th day of December, 2022. Thank you.
Why don't you keep those? I'm looking for, we've got one last presentation, Paul. Hoping everybody can hear. But the Veterans Advisory Board wants to present you with the 2022 Veteran of the Year, Paul Horgan. In grateful recognition of your many years of selfless service to support and care for the veteran community throughout the area. Your deep devotion, dedication, and advocacy has provided guidance and assistance in countless ways, both in the public and private ways. Your active participation and leadership roles in the advisory board and in local veteran service organizations, as well as volunteer hours, have been key to the number of initiatives that have improved the lives of a great number of fellow veterans. We deeply recognize and profoundly salute your lifelong commitment to veteran issues and your ongoing contributions to the Westborough veteran community. Thank you for your service and your dedication. Presented by the Veterans Advisory Board, 2022. Great job. Thank you for your help.
Now I can say thank you. Thank you, first of all, for making the presentations during the Selectmen's meeting. That's very, very nice, appropriate. So we thank you for your time. Thank you to Anna for the award. And you've always been a great support to veterans, especially here. And Mike, thank you for the award. And Jim, this was terrific. I wrote a few things because I knew I wouldn't remember them. But first of all, thank you all for coming. Thank you all for being here. It's such a joy and a surprise. And I thank you for the award. And I was kidding with somebody else. I said, usually I have the chance to select the guy who gets this award, but I got circumvented this time. and I appreciate it so much now. I can see the tremendous value of it. I'm really, everybody that gets awards say they're humbled, and I feel the same way, very humble. I look at it almost like the football awards. You can't do it alone. It's really an award for the group because you can really not worthily win or be qualified for it alone. In my case, having the honor to work with the Veterans Advisory Board, and Jim is the chairman, and I actually wrote everybody's name down, but they know who they are, and I know who they are. And the American Legion, working with John Gallina, who's here as well. And all the members of both organizations have allowed me to participate in various and accomplish various tasks, which could not be done alone. So it's an honor working with members of each organization. Part of this certainly is everybody else, because you never do, you never do the things we do alone, that's for sure. Everybody participates. I thoroughly enjoy having the ability to work with veterans and for veterans, and my intention is to continue to do that with the Veterans Advisory Board and the American Legion. Veteran is a title, and I look at it and I cherish it after the title of husband and father and grandfather. Pat and I have been married 57 years, the first 4 of which I was deployed in various ways, and she kept the home fires burning, and we've been married for 57 years, and she's really the strength behind me. My son Sean was born in Germany in a military hospital. My daughter Susan was born in Chelsea Naval Hospital. So they've been part of the flow. And my 2 granddaughters are here, Bridget and Kira, both products of the Westborough School. Bridget's a lawyer and Kira is a teacher. And I'm delighted to have them here because they're certainly a light of my life. But all I can say is thank you. And I appreciate the honor of being able to participate in these things. And this is a great honor too. I always avoided this. It's good to be the chairman because you can always keep moving, But it's wonderful to have this opportunity to see such great people here. All it's wonderful people, and I do appreciate that, and I feel very blessed by it. And I thank the officers and the select people that made this possible. So without further ado, I say thank you, and it was really wonderful. I thank
Good to see you. Happy holidays.
Jim? Jim? As they move out, we're gonna, so I am,
I was
thank you.
organizing a little press.
No, I am, folks notice on our agenda, we had an item scheduled for 9:20 tonight, but it was a request to appoint a new member to the Veterans Advisory Board, Maurice, is it Hires or?
Hires.
Hires. Thank you. We had his letter in our package. Jim is here if there are any questions for this, but this is for an opening on the Veterans Advisory Board. If there's no questions, I would entertain a motion from the board.
I move to appoint Maurice Hires to the Veterans Advisory Board for a term to expire June 30th, 2022.
Second that?
2023.
2023.
Yes.
Second that?
Seconded. Any comments, questions? Great. All those in favor? It's 5-0, 5 being present. Thank you for bringing him forward, and tell him thank you. And he can get sworn in with the town clerk now.
We'll take care of that. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Have yourself a good night.
Okay. So as Alan just said to me, those are one of the things that we probably enjoy most about being on the board. So it was nice to recognize such a worthy recipient there in Paul Horgan. So next on our agenda is, which I haven't done in a while, is kind of go through, kind of read into public record the board and committee openings. If the vice chair is ready, I'll ask him to read those out for us.
Okay. So current board, committee, and position vacancies as of December 2022. Town manager appointed. Cable TV advisory committee, there are 2 member vacancies. Constable, there is 1 position for 1 year. Diversity and inclusion committee, and 1 member for a 1-year term. Insect and pest control officer, 1 position for a 1-year term. Municipal building committee, 1 member for a 3-year term. And then for select board appointed positions, the active transportation and safety committee needs 2 members, 1 for a 2-year term and 1 for a 3-year term. The cultural council is seeking up to 12 members for a 3-year term. The housing partnership committee requires 2 members for a 1-year term. Sandra Pond Conservation Area Wardens, 1 member for a 1-year term. The Spirit Committee has openings for 3 members for a 1-year term. The Wastewater Treatment Plant Board could use 1 member for a 3-year term. And the Westborough TV Board of Directors could use 1 member for a 3-year term. If you are interested in applying, please send a letter of interest to the town manager's office.
Great, thank you, Sean. And I believe these are also posted out on the website, so thank you for that. Next on our agenda, or part of this agenda item, is open forum. Is there anybody here for open forum? Okay. Right ahead, next on our agenda is a update from our animal control officer. Welcome. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. Melinda McKendrick, I'm Animal Control. I think we have a couple. Melinda, can you hear me?
Yep.
Melinda McKendrick, I'm Animal Control. I think we have a quick PowerPoint. Okay.
You see it in front of us.
It's coming up.
Okay.
Lamps warming up.
All right. So I was asked to kind of do some review on the bylaws, maybe make a couple of recommendations, and I had been asked how I thought the current bylaw for loose dogs was working. You may have received in October just a quick rundown of all the dog bites over the last few years. And I think you can see there's really not a lot on public property. Most of the bites are either family members or like the UPS delivery people. Other than that, they're dogs that are running off their own property. They're not actually in the parks. I did have, after that report, I had one dog bite in the park in November. And it was when they were getting dogs into a vehicle. One just kind of turned and bit the other one. So that's kind of, the current town signage, I think, is working okay. And you can see I did a bunch of patrols this past in 2022. Again, through the end of September, beginning of October is when these numbers are. 6 people that I spoke to, it not necessarily that they were really in violation. They may have had the electronic collar on, but the dog was a little further away from them than I thought was good. Over at Lake Chauncey, I've also done a number of patrols, and I actually spoke with 6 people at Lake Chauncey, 1 at the boat ramp, and 5 of them, the 5 dogs at the park side, all had leashes or collars. The problem was the dogs were on the athletic fields. So there's a whole other issue there. And that, you can see what that resulted in, if you want to go to the next. So based on all of that, I do quite a bit of monitoring at the parks, and generally they are leashed and have an electronic collar. As I said, sometimes the animals are a little further away than I would like them to be, but right now what we have is in sight and range. So I was thinking maybe we could add a little bit of verbiage to preventing the dog from approaching other people or other animals that are in the area that don't want them to be approached. That might resolve the few that are straying a little further than I would like. Because it's kind of tough to issue a fine to people if they have the collar on, but the dog is, they still see it, and it's within the range of the collar, but it's really a little further than I think is a good idea, which is very difficult to quantify. And it usually has to do with the dog kind of running toward another dog or another person. So the other thing that I would like to try to, I thought I had done this before, was change some of the wording in the restraint section. No dog shall be allowed on lands designated by the Board of Health, town athletic fields. A little further down, it says the provision shall not apply to a dog specially trained to lead or serve a blind, deaf, or handicapped person, or a dog specially trained for police work. I thought I had changed this provision before, and I also thought that we had added the poultry regulations, but when I looked online today on the town clerk's site, I didn't see the change. So I'd like to take out some of the verbiage, that whole specially trained to lead, serve a blind, deaf, or handicapped person, and just replace it with the term service dog. And because we're using the term service dog, I'd like to put the term service dog, as defined by the ADA, into the definitions. And at the same time, we may want to consider adding emotional support dog, because they are 2 different things. And I think that pretty much is everything.
Can I go to the next slide? I'm gonna take it from here. If there's an emergency, I'm going to spell this out. There's a dog bite, someone has a medical problem, it's an emergency, you dial 911. If you have a dog that's loose and it's a call for service and you have a concern, please contact our communication center. It's very frustrating for us when people will email a complaint 6, 8, 12 hours later. It's kind of setting us up to fail. I mean, Fluffy may be in Upton, Fluffy may be in Grafton, but if you call when the complaint is happening, a police officer or Melinda, our ACO, will go and we'll look into it and hopefully resolve your issue. We do patrol and monitor these areas when we can, as well. So I just want to be clear that, email is really, if you have a question, email us and we'll respond back to you. But if you have a problem, live time, I'd just like to stress, we have a wonderful group of people sitting at the fire station that answer our 911 and our business line and our concern calls that'll get a friendly police officer out there to address your concern. Or if Melinda's on duty, Melinda will head out that way as well. Just kind of want to just stress that. It gets frustrating at times when you get an email a day after something happened and then we're trying to locate or, identify a dog that may not even be from Westborough, could be from Rhode Island. So anyway.
So just to kind of back up on the purpose of the agenda item, at our retreat in April, we had talked about enforcement, given that the bylaw had changed very recently. So a couple years ago, we updated the animal control bylaw. Last year, we added the poultry bylaw. And so there's been a lot of updates to it. So there was a question about talking about some enforcement. So we met a couple times in preparation for this, and one of the big questions I think we get asked is the provision that allows for the electronic collar working, or should it be a leash law? And one of the things that we felt, or that was indicative of whether or not it's working, is the number of dog bite reports that we've received. So what Melinda and Chief are showing you is that we're not getting a lot of those calls. We're not getting the calls for service, even though there are many, are not always related to dogs being off leash. So Melinda just went through a few tweaks that we could do to the bylaw to make it a little bit easier to enforce the electronic collar, but leave it in there. We have some other things that we were discussing relating to the animal control bylaw and kenneling, which will come to you later. And you'll get a full marked up version of the bylaw for that. But we just wanted to have the discussion with you here and just talk about the enforcement and that electronic collar piece.
Perfect. Other questions from the board?
Yep.
Shelley?
Yeah, so appreciate the update. I have to say I'm not sure that I think a comparison of the policy working is accurately measured by bites. I think it's certainly a measure, but I think I've personally seen it, and I'm not sure how we police it, enforce it, but I do think we have, we have a lot of not responsible dog owners, I guess is the only way I can say it, because people get rushed by dogs, they get, they're intimidated by dogs being off leash, and, I can't say whether or not, collars are being activated by the electronic activation. I don't know. I've been over at Lake Chauncey, and the dog is having a lovely time frolicking in the water with the leash on, but the person is not attached to them, right? Yeah. So I do think we could do a better job with signage. I think it's spotty, and I think that there are some opportunities there to identify some other locations. And I certainly would welcome, Melinda, your input, and Chief, yours as well. But then again, I say that, and there's a very clear sign when you get to Veterans Freedom Park as an example, and it says right there, it says what the bylaw effectively says, and people just let their dogs out, and they go running, and they don't have e-collars on. So, and that creates a whole, other than the safety and comfort of people who may not be comfortable with dogs, with droppings and, feces and all that, it creates a whole other problem. So I don't think we're there yet as a town, I guess I would just say, and I'm not, the purpose of tonight's discussion, I don't think, is to kind of come up with that solution, but I don't think we're there.
Yeah, just give us a call, and we'd love to look into those concerns.
Yeah. And I appreciate you putting this up here, and I know it's on the website, and I know we've talked about that, and I appreciate the distinction between 911 and, kind of, hey, we've got a kind of a dog running around, and, no one wants a dog to get hurt by running into traffic, but I do think that it's just an area that I don't think we're all, as a town, sort of on the same page, I guess.
So to speak to signage, when we first updated the bylaw, we added a significant number of signs in working with our conservation director at the time. She identified trails that we might want to have signage on. Some people have identified additional locations for signage, but they're not actually owned by the town, and so it's definitely not clear when you sort of cross town line into state land and things like that. So we've tried to review that, and so I think that we feel that we've put signage where we should, and that it says what it needs to. If there's ideas, we need to hear them, because we haven't identified them. So.
So there are, you know, and we can talk, I mean, I can send, you know, an email with some thoughts, but as just using Chauncey as an example, sort of the, kind of the, I'm gonna call it the road that goes around, the pond, do we own that?
Which road?
The road nearest the pond, that
So there's a
circumnavig-
shoreline drive that used to be part of Hospital Road that was part of the state hospital.
Yeah.
Yes, there's an older road that's still kind of there that goes around the backside and encompasses almost all of the trails in that area, and that is all state fisheries and wildlife.
Okay. And there is actually very good signage as you sort of enter that area, but then as you get on the trail,
It's
you know,
all fisheries and
it's all
wildlife.
fish, yep,
It's-
okay.
it's-
And just have, for the open space that we've recently acquired, whether it be Day Prayers, Wicker, do we have signs up there?
I don't know if there's signs.
None that I know of.
Okay.
I
So those would be
think that
two
was just
areas.
recently acquired.
Well, it's been, you know, a while. It's been, what, 9 months, at least a year in some cases? So I'm just saying, those are two areas where it's clearly open space. It's prime for people bringing their dogs. I do think that that's another area. But I think it's a, you know, I think your point of raising of, you know, reporting concerns, there's the number, there's an email address. I encourage people to do that because with more information for people that are using those, you know, locations, whether it's with or without a dog, you know, it makes it a better, safer community if we have good information as opposed to sort of anecdotal. So.
Thank you.
Other questions, comments from the board?
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Appreciate the
Take care.
update. Thanks. Our next agenda item was the request of,
We got a message that they're running late
Okay.
for this agenda item.
okay. Are we ready for the site plan overview for 165 Flanders? Everyone here that needs to be here? Perfect. Welcome.
Thank you. Good evening. I'm Andrew Platt with Bowler Engineering.
Actually,
Excuse
we
me,
just
can you move
pull
the
that
mic?
up? It's just, I'm sure, picking up.
Good evening. I'm
People
Andrew.
definitely listen on TV and they
wouldn't
complain
they?
when they can't hear people.
Thank you. All right. So I'm Andrew Platt with Bowler Engineering. On behalf of EG America for their site at 165 Flanders Road, also known as the headquarters for Cumberland Farms. As you may know, Cumberland Farms became a subsidiary of EG America in 2019. EG America is proposing a 50,000 square foot warehouse and a 17,600 square foot vehicle maintenance garage. The site is currently being reviewed by the Planning Board and Conservation Commission, and we've received comments from the Fire Department, Building Department, and Board of Health. So looking at the plan, as you probably know, the site is located on the east side of I-495 and north of the Massachusetts Turnpike. The main building is in the south part of the property and will not be affected by the current proposal. Both proposed buildings will be new standalone buildings. So starting with the warehouse, that'll be located in a field adjacent to I-495 and will be used primarily for items associated with EG America's business, including refrigeration and food service equipment, sandwich cases, electrical equipment, and similar items. Now, I don't know if it would be helpful for me to point at the screen. And actually, it's the next slide, if you don't mind. Yep. So I'll just point quickly, well, it's in the lower left right now. That's the warehouse area. Oh, thank you. So that warehouse will have 16 employee spaces and 42 tractor-trailer parking spaces. The area will drain to the existing detention basin in the middle of the site. Moving on to the vehicle maintenance building, that is located in the bottom center of the plan, roughly. I'll just point quickly. That will require demolition of the existing maintenance building. We're also going to replace the fuel dispensers and fuel tanks there. The new building will include vehicle washing and maintenance facilities, as well as office space. The existing 10,000-gallon underground fuel tank will be replaced with a 16,000-gallon tank, and runoff from this area will drain to a water quality swale, which will overflow to adjacent wetlands. And that's basically what they're asking for, so I'm happy to answer any questions.
Perfect. Open up to the board.
I expect the planning board has already dealt with this, but the 495 Mass Pike interchange project and the addition of a lane northbound on 495, that doesn't impact the location of the building or the plans at this point?
Yeah, I'm not sure exactly the impacts. I think this is somewhat dependent on that project going through. I don't know if Jim, if you have any information.
Do you want me to answer that?
Sure.
Oh, thank you.
Sure, glad to. Jim Robbins, Town Planner. So the actual engineering and the site of that interchange that you're speaking about, 495 and the Mass Pike, will not affect this site. There is drainage that relates to the two projects because drainage flows from this site towards 495, but the engineering for the 495 has an interim drainage plan. So the development of this site should not be impacted, and this site will not impact that project either.
Okay, thank you.
Sean?
Yeah, just a couple things. One, I guess I was encouraged that they're looking forward to, go forward with this project during kind of uncertain economic times. I think that bodes well for the company and for the town of Westborough. And there was one note of interest to me, and that was it mentioned a decommissioned wastewater treatment plant somewhere on the grounds. But it didn't mention that it was anywhere involved with this project. Where is that located, and I guess, was it originally part of, like, in use by this company, or is it just still happens to be there?
Yeah, it just still happens to be there. It's not going to be affected by the project at all. And I'll just point to it again.
Yep.
Just a little building there. It's relatively close to the warehouse, but it's not going to be affected by the warehouse. The driveway to the warehouse will tie into the existing driveway for that treatment plant.
It's not, it's currently not in use, right?
Correct. I don't know if Cumberland Farms or EGA America has any plans for that.
No, I think that's really all I have. Thank you very much.
Oh,
Thanks.
okay.
Shelley?
I think my only comment, just, and you addressed it briefly in your comments, but to pass on to the planning board would be to ensure that with the increase of impervious surface and roof line, that drainage is sufficient, stormwater. I mean, we're going to hear a whole presentation in just a little bit about stormwater management, so that, we're building for the worst case, not just sort of, typical. So that would be my only comment that I'd want to make sure is addressed, and I would imagine that's both planning board and conservation would be weighing in there. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for that, Shelby. That was one of mine too, especially with the new maintenance building. Talk about washing and whatever, and just what's happening with the runoff for that. Is it recycled through? How's it getting through systems, whatever? So just ensuring that that's covered and not going in as soapy water and other stuff out to the retention basins. I guess the other one that I had, and I'm sure it's coming up in terms of traffic on the new warehouse building with the number of truck spots, is that going to be increased truck traffic into this site because of this, or is that just there because they're going to be offloading and unloading displays and electrical equipment and all that? What's the...
Correct. Yeah, I don't think there's going to be a substantial increase in truck traffic. It's going to be basically existing truck traffic using that. They're kind of running out of space for what they're doing, so that's the purpose for the warehouse.
Okay. And then one final thing, I think I had read it in here, but correct me if I'm wrong, that there are some existing light poles that are exceed the height of what's like in our regulations, and I think it sounded like they're asked to be grandfathered in. I guess the question or comment there, I know we have rules about spillover or whatever. I would assume that would be enforced even if they're grandfathered for the larger light poles. Or it asks that they would be, because I know that's one of the things we've tried from spillover, but yeah.
That's a good question, and I'll address the drainage too, since you've brought that up, because it kind of relates to Alan's comment previously. So regarding the lights, you're right. They do have some older light poles that exceed the 20-foot town standard. We don't make them remove that. However, during this expansion project, they're required to provide a new photometric study. And we have a standard that you have to have at least 1 foot candle in any area that's paved, and more as you're getting adjacent to the building. So if there's like a man door or any access to a building, they have to have greater than 1 foot candle at that entrance and in the parking lot. So what that requires them to do is to provide more light fixtures than they would have had at 25 feet, which is the height of the older fixtures. But they still will not spill any light, so that the photometric study has shown that the light intensity at the property line is 0, and because this is such a large site, it's actually 0 before you get to the property line, because there's so much open space there. But we're very concerned, because there's so many buildings, that they have adequate lighting adjacent to the buildings in their large parking lot. So they'll have adequate lighting, but they won't spill. There'll be no light pollution leaving the site. Regarding drainage, so drainage is really the big issue on this site, because this site has a history at its neighbor adjacent to the Mass Turnpike of flooding. And so there is floodplain on this property, and the engineering department, the DPW engineering department that is doing their own engineering study, and the planning board has a peer review, which is done by Time Bond. And in addition to that, the Conservation Commission will have their own review for the wetlands and any drainage discharge to the wetlands. So we're looking at on-site, floodplain, and wetlands, and all of those things will be addressed.
Perfect. Thank you. Patrick?
Yeah, thank you. I just thinking of a question here. I noticed, again, as I was just reviewing the letters that were part of the packet, can you provide some more details around the 16,000 gallon underground fuel storage tank? I'd just be curious as to what the protections are, being in such a vulnerable wetland area, as to how that is going to be protected, as well as if there were a leak, what is the response that occurs for a leak? We just talked about stormwater and whatnot, but what happens if we have a leak in such a vulnerable area?
Yeah, I can probably get you further details on the tanks. I'm not a fuel tank expert, but I do know there's double walls, and there's an internal alarm system if there's just liquid between the two walls of the tank. And if that goes down at all, that signals a leak, and that turns a signal into the building.
Okay.
But I can get you more details on that if you need.
And it sounds like what you're doing here is improving what's probably existing there already, because you're replacing older.
Most likely, we don't really know the condition of the existing tank, but this will be brand new state of the art tank here. So.
Yeah. Thank you.
Anything else from the board? I'm not sure that we had any specific
I think the stormwater.
stormwater stuff which was being covered, but yeah. Yep.
So, just to address that question about the fuel station, the local fire department as well as the state fire marshal reviews the plan, so that you can be sure that there's adequate fire protection and prevention measures and industry standards are met for the containment.
Thank you, John.
So I think it's just, okay, so just the
Yep.
stormwater piece. Our side, so nothing additional from that. We're good. Thank you very
Okay.
much.
All right, thank you.
Appreciate it. We're still waiting on item 5. I don't want to go into the stormwater utility yet, a little early. Do you want to do the line inventory, or what do you have something else?
Do you want to do the zero ruggles, and then Wendy can come up now?
Sure. Okay, so we're gonna move to item 14 then. The closing on the Zero Ruggles. So do you wanna?
At the October town meeting, the town meeting approved the acquisition of the property and the appropriation of the funds for the property at Zero Ruggles. It was divided into parcels A, B, and C, with with A and C coming under the care and control of the select board. At the recent town meeting on Saturday, parcel A was actually, or that article was amended so that parcel A and B would go to the Conservation Commission and just C would come to the select board. So the closing for the property is scheduled for December 20th. And so there are some actions that the board needs to take. And so one of them is the acceptance of parcel C. So you need to sign the attached, or sorry, sign the deed for parcel C. And then parcels A and B, that deed needs to be accepted and signed by both the select board and the Conservation Commission. The Conservation Commission is meeting on Thursday night, and we'll have that on the agenda. And then we also need to sign the project agreement. So you have that in your packet as well.
Is the project agreement just one that I as chair sign? Is that how it's in there?
That's what we've been advised, yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Great. Are there any questions? Or if not, I entertain a motion.
Moved pursuant to the votes taken under Article 18 of the October 17th, 2022 annual town meeting and Article 3 of the December 10th, 2022 special town meeting to purchase the property located off Ruggles Street and to execute and to authorize the chair to execute on behalf of the board any and all acceptances, project agreements, affidavits, settlement statements, and any and all other documents necessary or convenient to accomplish the foregoing acquisition.
I should have added that your phase 1 environmental site assessment is also in your packet. We have that done every time we do acquire a property. This was done by Ty and Bond, and it was also reviewed by town council. And so there were no concerns raised. So you have that in your packet if you have any questions about that. That's part of our due diligence after we sign the purchase and sale agreement.
Yep. Thank you for bringing that. I should have brought that up too. But and typically we look for that. If there are things that have been raised concerns, we'd go to a phase 2. Because there are no concerns, I don't see any reason for us to go to phase 2. And that's the results are what we expected on this property from what we knew about it. So.
I'll second that.
Okay, moved and seconded. Any further questions or comments?
No, I guess I just, being that there were a lot of authorizations to you, Ian, if there's something that comes up that's, I can't imagine there would be, but there were a lot of things to sign and accept and, any and other documents, I assume those would come, the board would somehow be notified if there was something out of the ordinary, I guess.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
you'll be able to execute all typical closing documents, but if anything
Yep.
extra came up.
Super.
Sure. And then Wendy's, our town clerk, is here just for you to sign in front of her
Great.
once you've completed your vote.
Okay. Any other questions? Thank you, Shelby.
Thanks.
Okay, all those in favor? It's 5-0, 5 being present.
Exciting.
So pass it around. While we're doing that, Christy, and she's watching, can I take item 15 and take care of that one too?
Sure.
So item 15 relates to executive session minutes, and I think as the board is aware, we'd received a request for executive session minutes for dates including July 19th, 2022, all 2022 days, but July 19th, August 2nd, August 23rd, September 6th, September 13th, September 27th, October 11th, October 26th, and November 2nd. And so we had looked at those and redacted what was necessary to be redacted for things that are still ongoing, cannot be released. And we made those available, so we're required to announce it at a subsequent meeting that we did that, and that's what we're doing here. So what I just said before was the announcement that we have delivered upon that request to deliver out those redacted minutes for those dates that I read off. Anything further on that one?
Nope. Just Ian.
And Wendy, that one needs
That's
the
just it.
notarization of Ian's signature.
That was just one.
That's it.
Perfect.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Do you want these back? Yes.
Just gonna shred it once you sign it. No, that's it's relatively uneventful for what we did there in Zero Ruggles. That's exciting, or will be exciting once we finally close, but to move on that property, and add it to our kind of open space here in town, as well as we've talked about at the town meetings, protection for and availability for, future needs related to, water, and the water tower that's at the top part of that property. Okay. What else do we want to do here? What's up? Meeting minutes, okay. So we have a number of meeting minutes. I would entertain motions for their approval.
Good.
I move we approve the meeting minutes from October 3rd, 2022, October 17th, 2022, October 26th, 2022, and November 2nd, 2022.
Second.
Okay, moved and seconded. Are there any comments, corrections, additions, or deletions on any of those four that anybody had? Okay, seeing none, all those in favor? 5-0, 5 being present. What's that?
And then you also, we might want to note that the mobile station, which is item 11 on the agenda, is actually being deferred to December 27th, that agenda item, at their request.
Okay. Thank you. That one was gone. We don't have the proponents for the placing the menorah, but being 7 o'clock, I'm going to move forward with the, folks are okay with that, with the stormwater utility fund presentation? Any issues? Okay.
Good evening, everybody. Chris Pant, Director of Public Works. We have Derek Sari, our Assistant Director, Rich Niles and RJ Dowling from Woodard and Curran, who we've been working with. Tonight, we're going to be talking about everybody's favorite subject, stormwater. Establishing or figuring out how to fund stormwater requirements has been a discussion ongoing for several years inside at least the town staff. One of the 2020 town manager goals was to look at establishing a enterprise fund, or what options do we have. So that's what we're going to be talking about tonight. So a little over a year ago, we started working with Woodard and Curran, and so internal to the town staff, we talk about, what are our options, what we can do. What if you want to take it to the next level, and really get some analysis done, which is what we've done. You have to pay somebody, and so we worked with Woodard and Curran and secured a grant a year ago through the Clean Water Trust. That grant paid for an evaluation of all of our culverts in town, and we received a report on that, and that was just finished. And the second part of that grant funded an evaluation of stormwater funding options. And so we're culminating, or we're about to culminate that project, what was defined in the scope of work. And we're finishing that by coming to you over this meeting and potentially a follow-up in January to show you what we have. So before I hand it over to Rich, who's going to go through a presentation, and then we'll have an opportunity for questions, I do want to kind of put some context to this. So we are potentially talking about a fee for the town, for users, to fund stormwater. And the question could always be, why do we need to do that? Why do we need to do it now? And how have we survived for the last, years, decades, whatever, without it? And I'll just describe a couple of things that I think potentially influence that. One, we do now, and we always have, to some degree, maintained our stormwater infrastructure. And the town has funded over time, various projects, large-scale projects to improve stormwater infrastructure. But there's always been a funding gap, and there remains a funding gap. And along with that funding gap, we look at our assets, and every year an asset is in the ground, it's getting older, and so that funding gap is increasing. So our life cycle continues for the infrastructure, and over time it's that gap is increasing. Every time we accept a new road, we're accepting more infrastructure, so the gap's only getting larger. And so we have this gap, we have aging infrastructure, and then more recently, and maybe most importantly, we have more mandates. So we've spoken to you before about our MS4 permit requirements, and there are specific things we are required to do, which all cost money. And so those things collectively, combined with the fact that we had an opportunity to get some money to start this process, brought us to today. And so tonight, we're going to present to you what we've looked at in terms of an evaluation. We've already discussed it with the finance team, and so we've gotten some good feedback from them. We've refined our thoughts on that a little bit based on their feedback, and tonight we'll show it to you. At the end of this, we're not asking you to do for a vote. We're just asking you to really, we need to know if this is something we think we want to advance. Do we want to take it to the next step and continue to pursue this? And so ultimately, that's what we're looking for. So we're going to present this, have an opportunity for discussion, and ideally at the end of this, get some sort of indication from you as to where you think we should go. And hopefully, if you're supportive, we'll come back in January and take next steps. So with that, I want to hand it over to Rich.
Good evening. Thank you for the time. I'm going to try to go through this in about 15 minutes and allow for enough discussion. So hopefully answer some questions as we're going along. So I'm going to ask that we have discussion at the end. It's going to be a fair amount of content, so take notes if you have a question along the way. You already saw the overview. So just to reiterate a couple points, I've done this study with probably 36 communities in Massachusetts, New England as a whole. I'm doing some work in Florida. Everybody's facing the same challenges associated with funding stormwater. Really what we're looking at is trying to lean towards a more proactive program. There's been a funding gap, aging infrastructure, these things don't go away. So trying to get to a more cohesive and more sustainable program is really the goal here, and allow DPW to continue to do what they've been doing to maintain infrastructure. Again, we want to provide kind of what we think is potential next steps and get feedback on that. So this, again, is just really kind of presenting some of the information that we've discussed with DPW, went through stormwater program needs. So what are we currently doing? What is not being done that needs to be done better, or increased level of effort due to increased demand? So what are the primary needs in the town? And those are primarily culverts, flooding issues. Chris mentioned MS4, so regulatory compliance and maintenance of the system. Water quality issues like Chauncey, so dealing with nutrients and beach closures. There's a water quality aspect to the federal mandate that we have to look at infrastructure in a different way than we've done in the past, and that's a big challenge for every community. Everybody's faced with aging infrastructure that may not have even been sized appropriately for the conveyances back in the day. So with new development come new challenges. And there's quite a few assets, so this is just a quick snapshot, and you get thousands of feet of pipe in the community. People forget that these things are underground. So that is a challenge, communicating that to the public. But we took a look at that and said, okay, what are we doing currently? What's funded through the DPW General Fund? And you can see these activities: MS4 permit compliance, infrastructure repairs, general administration, operation and maintenance. And what really constitutes the gap is we don't have somebody dedicated to managing this. We have a lot of obligations for DPW staff. A lot of communities are turning towards a dedicated stormwater program manager that does permit compliance review, engineering. They will take on some of those MS4 permit obligations. But as we start to invest in capital projects, you need somebody to manage those. And so it's a new increased workload if we're talking about a funding gap, so there is some staff resource demand and administration demand. Increased operations and maintenance due to permit requirements, capital projects, and I'll get into a few examples of those. So Chris mentioned the culvert assessment project. So we went out with DPW and did a culvert inventory and assessment for condition, and we assessed 155 culverts. There were 48 that were inaccessible. So you have over 200 culverts throughout the town. And we ranked them, and you see the priority ranking here. And these are prioritized based on the scoring matrices that we, looks like I keep losing audio here.
It's not you, it's something with the system tonight.
We can
Yeah.
we can hear you, and
Okay.
the TV is probably picking
All
up
right.
just fine. So.
Okay, not a problem. So, you know, what we see is that we have a lot of deteriorated culverts. Corrugated metal pipe was a common inexpensive material 50 to 70 years ago that was used all the time. We still use it, but it's much better. It's new and enhanced with new coatings. But regardless, we've got aging infrastructure. And we look at just the top 20 out of your 200 plus culverts in the community, and you look at the cost, and you start to add that up. If we were to take 3 culverts per year, on average, we're looking at about $500,000 just to do 3 per year. So you get a 7-year backlog just with what's on this list. Plus, we've got 48 that haven't been assessed. So you start to think of the things that we haven't looked at for quite some time, many of which have maybe been on a list that haven't been funded. But now we have a comprehensive plan to prioritize those and more strategically work through that backlog. So we met with DPW multiple times to review the program needs and the cost. And when we look at how we're trying to build a more cohesive stormwater program, we typically put them in these program categories just to understand, you know, administration personnel, O&M, and capital. It's just a kind of a logical way that we look at all utilities and infrastructure programs. And we look at the future needs. The gap that we're looking at is about 1.5 million, largely capital projects to replace infrastructure or alleviate flooding issues, et cetera. That first category, stormwater program management, is a stormwater engineer to help administer and oversee the program. And then there's some increased level of maintenance, and then if you're building capital, you need to do some planning and engineering as well. So this is really looking at what is the gap in funding, in addition to the activities that DPW is already conducting. So when we think of, okay, that's another $1.5 million per year that we're talking about, what does it look like to do something that's even more proactive or aggressive? So we kind of start to look at level of service, and this is just meant to show that you have a lot of assets in the ground that are worth a lot of money. If you were to have to replace this, the replacement value is tens of millions of dollars. So we're over 100 million, and we think of how we typically budget for capital programs and O&M. We can kind of look at a percentage, and you have to invest a certain percentage per year. If you're investing 2% in capital replacement, you can, in theory, replace something every 50 years, which is typically the design life, but we don't do that, right? So we're not at that level of service. So this would represent more of a high level of service. If we were going to fund a program, somewhere in the $2 to $3 million range is probably where it would need to be more sustainable and more proactive. And it really starts to tackle a lot more at once. So I think what we're thinking with a $1.5 million program, it's a good start, and it's a more modest program that's manageable out the gate, but needs do grow over time. So when we look at, well, if we recognize that we have needs, we have a funding gap, we've quantified that, and it's 1.5, maybe it's 1.6 or 1.7. We look at, well, what are really the key ways to fund that level of program? How do we generate revenue on an annual basis to do that? There's only a couple options for that amount of revenue. So we've got a tax increase. Then we also have, there's a legislation that allows you to basically dedicate a portion of taxes to an account. It doesn't really make much difference. It's just putting tax revenue into a different bucket. But it is an option. A lot of communities are turning to a stormwater utility or user fee-based funding approach. It's an enterprise account similar to water and sewer. And the reason a lot of people turn to that is so that we can have a stable revenue source every year that we can rely upon. We can use that to pledge towards other grant programs and outside funding to leverage that. We say it's adequate. These are things that kind of stick out as kind of key advantages. We've thought out the program, we understand our needs, and we know that that's going to provide a better level of service going forward. The money can be used in a variety of ways for operations and maintenance versus capital. So we're not constrained like other funding programs are sometimes constrained. Some only pay for planning, some only pay for capital. And in many ways, it's more equitable in terms of what you're paying for based upon your quote-unquote use of the system, like a water and sewer program, as you pay for what you use. And we'll get into that a little bit more. There is an opportunity for Water Management Act credits, so having a utility has some kind of indirect benefits. And so we think of the general approach for stormwater utilities across the nation. There's probably 2,500 utilities across the nation. The overwhelming majority, they use an impervious area-based approach. So impervious area, hard surfaces, driveways, roofs, sidewalks, et cetera. You know, it's a way to measure, because we don't have meters to measure flow off of properties. We don't have water meters. It's a surrogate to look at how much do you contribute to the stormwater system. That's the public system that receives your stormwater. So we look at that as a kind of a measurement tool. It's widely accepted. So, you know, a big shopping center has a lot of runoff. They may have stormwater controls, but they still contribute, versus a homeowner has obviously a proportionate difference of that. So we look at the data, and that kind of informs, well, how do we approach it for individual communities? When you look at the total number of parcels, so the pie chart on your left is the total developed parcels that have a building on them, a dwelling, business, et cetera. So majority of your parcel numbers are residential, typically single family is how we look at this. And then we look at the representation of impervious area. The majority of the impervious area is associated with non-residential parcels. So they're the ones that are contributing the most runoff. So we look at, well, what's the most appropriate way to allocate, you know, how it gets funded based on that metric. So a couple different methods that were considered during this study that we reviewed with DPW and others. A common one is what we call the equivalent residential unit, and that's to say that, well, most single-family residential properties are kind of the same. They fall within a certain range, but you also have some really small and really big ones. This is kind of a little bit of an old methodology that you'll see a lot of utilities across the country, even in New England, have adopted. And for Westborough, your typical or your median impervious area on single-family parcels is about 4,200 square feet. Just to kind of keep that number in mind. So this approach, if your business has 10 times the size of a typical single-family, their fee is 10 times more. So just kind of a really, really basic rate methodology, very simple, but it doesn't recognize differences between properties. So when we look at what we call a flat rate, we're taking a smaller unit of impervious area and we're treating everybody the same. So we're saying if you have 4,000, you get 4 billing units, and if you got 40,000, you get 100. So, you know, that's kind of how, I'm sorry, 42. Simple math sometimes catches me. So this is it recognizes smaller difference in properties, so many people see this as more equitable, but it is a little more intense in terms of the administration, and a lot more properties fall on the margin of that, and so your data has to be better to support that. So there's kind of pros and cons to each approach, and I'll go through just the rest of this quick, and then we'll get into examples so we can see what other communities have done. A lot of communities look towards a tiered approach for single family. So we're talking single family residential properties. This is a histogram showing the number of properties at a certain block or range of impervious area, and the median's kind of in the middle. And we'd start to look at, well, how do we slice this apart to recognize different size properties? Well, the data to me, when I look at it, is like kind of a small, medium, and large bucket. And so there's logical ways that we could break that apart into tiers to recognize those differences. So, you know, grandma and her, 1,200 square foot impervious area property is not paying the same as a McMansion, And so some people feel that's more fair and appropriate. And that was really the preference from DPW and other, review with other staff, that seems to make more sense. But we'll look at the options again on the next slide here. So we kind of looked at these 3 different categories for single family, and then a multiple of that would be used and applied as a billing unit for non-residential properties. And that's a common practice that we see with a lot of other utilities. So just really quick, when we think of the 3 options that we presented, and again, there's probably 30 options, and you can do rate structures and studies and come up with you know, different preferences. At the end of the day, we're trying to balance, in my mind, what I think is something between, you know, what seems to be the most fair, but also not overly complicated. So there's a balance between simplicity and equity, and a tiered approach kind of falls in the middle of that. And so we looked at the different rate approaches to see what does it mean if we take this rate structure and look at funding a $1.5 million program. And so there's a lot of numbers here, and that's to show that we really did the math. But these are not absolute numbers, so these are preliminary. Now you'd have to do a final rate study. We changed the program costs, we changed the rate structure, we improved the quality of the data. Things change, so there's some dials that get tuned at some point. So, but what we looked at is, you know, looking at the slide, tier 1 is the small residential, tier 2 is medium, and then large. So the annual fee to fund a $1.5 million program for about half of the single-family residential properties is $57 per year. And you can see the rest and so on. So really large properties, you're going to pay around $173 per year. So we can look at different ways to either phase fees, we can look at different rate structures to shift kind of the burden. And so there's some logic that we can apply to that. At some point, the differences aren't that big to warrant you know, slicing it any thinner. So, so there's about 24 stormwater utilities in Massachusetts. Here's some examples that kind of touch upon the different rate structures that I mentioned. Bellingham, Fall River, they kind of have a flat fee. It's just all single-family residential properties get charged one fee, that's it. They're not recognizing differences in property sizes. Millis took a 1,000 square unit, a smaller unit, about 1,500 square feet. So they're looking at all properties the same. It doesn't matter if you're residential or commercial industrial. We're going to take we're going to take your impervious area, divide it by 1,500, and then put you into a bucket for simplicity's sake. Shrewsbury takes single family and does a tiered rate approach, which is a little more common in some other communities. So just to kind of show you, you know, what sort of Westborough's dashboard communities that you guys kind of turn to, Franklin, you know, they're funding a $1.57 million program. I helped them establish their fee. They just implemented that last year. You can see the typical residential property is paying $56 per year, but you have some that are paying much more. So there's a range based on that rate structure. So they took a flat approach, and it's about 1,000, I think it's 1,000 square feet. Reading is one of the oldest utilities in the state of Massachusetts. They took an ERU approach. They didn't have really good data back then. They said, well, residents are kind of the same in Reading, in our mind, and no one's going to care. And they implemented the fee, and it's been in place for almost 15 years or so. So it's a simple approach, but we can do things differently now, and that's kind of how we've seen things evolve into more of tiered rate structure. Shrewsbury, Westford, those are new utilities. They felt the tiered approach was more appropriate. Hudson, we're actually doing a similar study in Hudson, and that's what they're proposing as well. So you kind of see the fees. The fees and the programs are kind of in the range of what we're talking about here, so fairly typical. So with that, I'll open up the questions, discussion, and just to kind of reiterate, the goal of this meeting was to get some level of understanding of the program, the funding gap, the needs, and does it make sense to move forward and advance this approach to fund the program? So.
Great, thank you. Open up to questions. Shelby?
Sure. Do you want to just kind of go through my questions, or if folks want to? Okay. Okay. So if we could just go back to the slide that has the number of assets. It was like your second, or I think the second slide. Yep, right there. Thank you. So first of all, thank you. Great presentation. Appreciate getting it in advance. Very thorough. And this is, I think, anytime we have presentations like this and work, it really helps with our decision making, obviously. So I didn't want to assume these are all town assets. So like if I have a culvert on my property that I was required to put in when I built it, that wouldn't be counted as an example. Is that a fair
That's
statement?
correct. Yep.
Okay.
This is town only, this isn't state or private.
Okay, thank you. Question one done. Awesome.
That was easy.
Yeah, see, that was easy.
Start off slow.
See,
All right,
yeah, that's right. I'm
thanks.
going to build up, you know. Let's see here. Of course, I didn't write what slide these are on. So there was a piece on service. Hang on one second. Sorry, you guys.
Level of service?
Yeah, I didn't understand. Okay, so it was the pie. Oh yeah. So your slide that has where you started talking about 1%, 2%, 3%, 2 point. Yeah, keep going right there.
Yeah.
I did not catch sort of your encapsulation of what you were saying on this
Yeah,
slide.
sorry.
That's okay. And I felt that was important, so let's.
This is the culmination of probably 4 or 5 meetings, right?
Yeah.
So you guys
that's
don't have
okay.
the benefit of that time spent with it.
I was with you up to the 1.5, like that's sort of where we need to be, and then when
Yeah.
you got to here, I was like, that was just.
Yeah, I probably hit
That's
this
okay.
too quickly. So this is just another way to look at where we don't have, like, we haven't inspected every pipe in town.
Right.
We don't know the condition of every pipe, but we think of at a really gross level, what do we have for assets? And if we're going to properly manage assets, like you would say manage a home or another investment, infrastructure, you don't have $1 million asset and only spend $500 per year maintaining it. It's just that it's going to fall apart, right? Sure. So we look at infrastructure in a similar way. So if we know the number of structures, we know the replacement cost. What does it cost to replace a catch basin, this type of pipe, this culvert? So this is kind of a planning level assessment where we look at the value of the assets, and then we say, okay, if we're going to, 2%, and this is based on industry standards primarily for water infrastructure, because we've done more asset management historically for water, because drinking water systems have been around the longest. Sanitary followed thereafter, right?
Yep.
And stormwater is the last frontier
Okay.
in our world. But it's a kind of common practice when you think about, okay, if I'm going to replace that infrastructure, the current value and cost to do so is $112 million. That's a lot of infrastructure in the ground. It's a ton of money.
Right.
So if we're going to look at, making sure that we replace it as it ages and hopefully before it fails, design life is typically 50 years. We're getting 75 to 100 out of some of these, but then at the end it has no bottom. Like it's literally gone. So they're beyond life expectancy. But if we were to look at how we would fund it to be more sustainable, 2% for capital renewal replacement, we look at 2% of this total value, and that gives us a sense of like, okay, what should we be investing in capital for a good program that is more sustainable and proactive? That's a pretty high level of service, right? So, and then we look at operations and maintenance is about 1 to 2%. That's typically what utilities spend to maintain this type of asset program, right? So this would be more of a target for a high level of service. This means these guys got all the money they need to do and replace stuff every year, work through that priority list pretty quickly. That's not where most communities start, because that means you're going 0 to 60 pretty quick.
Yep.
As much as we would like to have the money to spend, we also have to do planning, design, permitting. It does take time to ramp up a program to get to that level. So it is just used as a point of comparison to say, okay, well, 1.5 is modest. It's not going to solve everything right away. It's going to take time. This is what a more sustainable level of service will look like.
Okay, thank you. That's very
Or
helpful.
proactive, yeah.
You mentioned on the next slide, when you talk about funding options, or I thought you said sort of with the tax increase and the investment fund, what I thought I heard you say was it's not a stable or dependable source. Is that because it's voted on at recurring town meetings?
Correct.
Okay,
Right.
okay, so that,
Still requires an annual appropriation via the general fund.
okay,
It just goes into a dedicated account.
okay.
I only bring this up because it's an option.
Yep.
By state legislature. It's something you could do. I haven't seen a community do it
Yep.
yet.
Yep. Okay. And then the stormwater utility is I presume anything that goes in there is only dedicated to that, even though there's flexibility in how that money, but it only applies to
Yes.
stormwater maintenance improvements, et cetera.
Correct.
Okay.
Right.
All right, super. On the next slide where you have the pie charts, on the left-hand side, the 81% you said single-family residential, but then I thought you included business in there.
Yeah, so single-family residential makes up 80% of the total number of parcels.
Okay,
There's just more properties.
yep,
Smaller, so when you look at all other parcels is everything that's not residential,
okay.
or single family. So it's commercial, industrial,
Okay.
nonprofit, state, federal.
Okay, and so sometimes we use the term residential. We just had our tax classification hearing, and so when we think of residential, so we have a number of large residential where people live in buildings,
Yeah.
complexes. How are those factored into this pie chart? In your language.
So like condos, apartment complexes, anything more than single family is lumped into the all other
The
property.
19%?
Yes.
Okay, okay.
Yeah, and so that's handled through like the billing process and who gets the bill and all that. That's kind of the fine detail
Yep.
of the billing account setup.
Yep.
But that's how we're representing the data
Sure.
here. Yeah.
Well, given the number of
And it makes sense, I think.
rental properties and the higher percentage that we have here, it becomes, and, think about like user fees or assessments or whatever the right language is. That could, and we think about equity, that depending upon the model, it could have, I think it would be helpful to understand kind of what that impact would be on the end user, meaning the renter,
Yeah.
in that 19%. But anyway, that's for other conversation.
Yeah, and I think we don't want to mislead to say that every resident, every dwelling gets the same cost. Single-family homes, we presented that option.
Yep.
If you look at a condo, you take all the common impervious area. If it's a private road, that's part of the calculation. And then we send a bill to the condo association.
Mhm.
They decide how to distribute that. That's
Sure.
fairly common, but you could do it in other ways,
Right,
So
yeah, no.
in some cases, it may work out that those units are paying less than a single family normally would.
Yeah.
Just because it's a representation of their impervious divided by the total units, right?
Sure,
So
right.
it varies. It could depend on how long the road is, how much
Right.
parking they have.
Right.
Sometimes it ends up being close to the same.
Okay. And then just on the other pie chart then, so if you could just explain that then.
Yeah, so this pie chart's saying that the total impervious area, the IA is impervious area.
Yep, okay, thanks.
So, and that's,
I thought it was like a road in Maine, 1A, so you lost me there, so, okay.
well, it's also the public's watching too, so.
Thank
They
you.
may not know all our acronyms, so I apologize. That's showing the percentage of impervious area associated with each of those property types.
Okay.
So the majority of impervious area townwide is on those non-single family
Yep.
parcels.
Which
right?
makes sense.
So it's like, okay,
Yep.
total count, we've got a lot of parcels residential, but they're not the ones with all the impervious area.
Sure,
So,
Yep.
so
okay.
that's part of what kind of helps inform how we look at this rate
Yep.
approach.
Okay, that makes sense. I'm getting through it, guys.
Okay.
Hopefully, maybe I'm answering someone else's questions. So, you mentioned, I'm sure my colleagues will have questions on the funding models, but if you go to the funding evaluation table, which I could tell you enjoyed presenting, because there are lots of numbers and information. I guess this is a question for you or for our town manager. So tax exempt properties are exempt from these types of fees. Is that a fair assumption?
No,
No.
no.
Okay.
So all properties get a fee.
Okay.
Just like a tax exempt property pays a water bill or sewer bill.
Okay.
So that's what, when we look at user fees, that's part of it. So you treat everybody the same. I mean, communities can choose to exempt
Yep.
certain things. And, but you start to run into legal challenges when you're looking at charging on the basis of a fee, and you're saying that you're using part of the system but not paying for it, right? We can look at how we discount things maybe, or phase them for certain property types, because, churches, for example, it's tough to absorb a new fee, right? So we can handle certain property types and handle impact in certain ways through the rate structure implementation process. But the reason it's blank is because it has to be calculated for every individual parcel. It's not the same. So residents fall in one of those 3 tiers, and then that's your fee.
Okay, sure.
The calculation has to be done, and I noted that in the bottom. Fees are calculated by the total impervious area divided by 2,000 square feet times $4.81, and that gives you your cost per month.
Okay, thank you.
So that's why, yeah, sorry.
No, that's, that,
Michelle, if I could just jump in,
yeah,
while you're
yeah,
looking for
yeah,
that.
yeah.
So that, back to your chart that Michelle had asked about you can do it via taxes or we can do it this way. That is the difference, is when you do it through taxes, the taxes on property is not gonna pay for the fee. Right, doing it as a user fee, those properties would be
Well,
paying,
plus it's not,
just like they do for sewer and water.
right, and plus it's not necessarily dependable, because every town meeting you're going for an appropriation and,
Yeah.
yep,
Yeah, but tax exempt, so it is kind of new revenue
Yeah,
that you would never got
right,
through tax exempt,
yeah,
which in some communities makes a big difference if you got like a state college or something that's not, that's tax exempt.
Yep.
Others see it as an impact on people who may not be able to pay for it easily. So, but we can address those things as things advance,
Okay.
you know?
I think those are really my main questions. I'm interested in what the board has. Thank you very much.
Perfect.
Welcome.
Sean?
Well, thank you, yeah, you covered a lot of what I had, that was good. So it's interesting if you talk about then the municipal water infrastructure fund. Right now, the town are, on the residential side, the residents pay 70% of the real estate taxes in town. So I guess you would be going based on assessed value, correct? So,
Right.
and, that does include in apartments and other types of structures, but you're saying that's 70%, and within this utility fee, it was looking like basically the inverse of that, I think, which makes sense because those are not the primary users of the stormwater utility. Do we currently have all the data necessary to do this? Like, do we know the impervious area of
Yes.
every location already?
Yeah, so these are real numbers, and just to get at what you're hinting at here, which is, you're looking at, look at the third row down, revenue per year by category. So your non-residential properties are paying, which includes some residential, right, multifamily condos, is paying $1 million of that 1.5. The residential, so it's not completely inverse, but it is shifts that based upon their metrics, right? So it is a different approach. So when we think of, you look at the property value, you've got a small footprint on a home, relatively high value, relationship. So your impervious area value to property value for non-residential is typically a lot different, right? So residents do typically win, if you want to call them winners, but you're charging them a new fee no matter what. So they're paying less than they would have through taxes. So no one's saving money because we have a funding gap, but they are paying less under this scenario based upon their decreased proportionate burden on the system. So.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So I just want one more thing. So, and that's why people look at this, is the relationship between stormwater needs and property value doesn't correlate very well. Just like we don't charge people for water based upon your property assessed value, right? It's not perfect, right? So it's not a perfect system, but it makes a lot more sense, and there's a stronger rationale to support it.
On the stormwater program evaluation under, when you're estimating, or not estimating, when you're listing all the assets, I guess this is the current state. Would there be an expectation that any of these numbers would be increasing in the future, or
do we feel like the current infrastructure, at least the amount we have, is sufficient? Like, would we expect to see an increase in culverts or detention basins over time? Okay.
I think, Chris, I'll let you speak to that if you want, but unless I can cover it, I'll try. So accepting new roads, new developments, this doesn't account for additional growth. So, this is just your current assets. There could be more over time, right? So is that, well, if you want to add to that
Yeah,
more.
I mean, the town's gonna develop, we're gonna add more infrastructure. I think, part of the discussion is setting expectations, and I think it's not realistic to say it's never gonna increase, but we control kind of the rate of increase, right? We increase water rates, we increase sewer rates for various reasons, and I imagine that over time, if we implemented this, there would be increases. Now, how frequent or how much, I think that's up to us. And right now, there's nothing funding. So even if we did this and said, look, we're just going to keep it stable for X number of years for whatever, because we think that's appropriate, we're not going to lose there because we're getting more than we had before, right? So, I don't know if that answers the question, but
No, thank you.
it will increase, but
Yeah.
it's up to us, how rapidly or whatever that happens.
Yeah.
Well, the advantage is if you add to this, presumably it's new, right? So it shouldn't be a significant burden from a capital standpoint, but it is increased operation and maintenance costs right out the gate. So,
Can I just, so it would be interesting if, as we go forward and we adopt this then, and there's growth, it would be an interesting calculation as part of, I presume, maybe site plan, or to apply this data to understand what is the anticipated additional operational maintenance burden on the town projected.
Yeah.
It might not be initial, but right, so that becomes, so we typically get very excited about, right, oh, it's a new business, or they're expanding, or what have you, but we rarely, in my understanding, really ever look at this as a factor of kind of the ongoing cost to the town,
right.
offsetting the benefit of increased tax revenue.
So the one thing to think about is, as new development occurs, our number of billing units grows. So our revenue through this fee does grow. And does it grow proportionate based on that type of development? So that's where you're gonna have an increase in billing units. We can also look at restructuring the rate a little bit. So you can change your rate structure and modify it over time, based upon increase in or change in development, Something else we didn't talk about is credits, right? So I don't know if you're familiar with crediting process through this funding mechanism, but there is a mechanism and there is some requirement in state law that you allow some type of credit. It doesn't say how much, it doesn't say for what exactly, but you have to have the ability to quote unquote abate or not use part of the system. Now, there's some costs that are associated with all infrastructure that we can't avoid. And your kind of demand upon it isn't 100% of your fee. And there's compliance and other things that everybody has to pay for, even if you're contributing no stormwater, right? That's where it's not exactly perfect. However, properties that meet current stormwater design standards that are not placing a burden upon the public system, they're managing it on site, you could decide that, well, we're gonna give you some credit because you met standards, you're treating stormwater differently than the property next door. And because people will say that and say, well, I'm meeting all the standards, I'm managing my stormwater. It's like, yeah, but you use the road that goes, all the traffic goes to your business. Like, that culvert needs to be replaced at some point. You're not paying for that. Under this fee, you would, So even though you're managing your stormwater, we're managing the public system here, so.
Just a couple other things. So I guess part of what we've done in the past has been funded through grants, right? Would we still look for grant opportunities to support the program? And, oh, I had one other, and I guess this is more just maybe a comment than a question. As we improve the service of this program, we would expect to then see benefits other places within the town, right? I mean, it would improve, in theory, our roads would be maintained better if we were managing stormwater better and, things of that nature. So in theory, spending this money may help us save money in other places within the town. Would that be an accurate statement?
I don't know that we could ever quantify that, but yes, ideally, yes. I mean, that's why we want to manage the water, is
Like less
for that exact
flooding
reason.
and
Yeah,
less,
flooding
situations,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, one example of that would be detention basins, right? So if you don't maintain them on a regular basis, they get overgrown, they become very difficult to then go back in and do routine maintenance, and you're essentially doing complete rehabilitation. And in some ways, you're reconstructing that basin, so what would have been, $1,200 a year to mow it and maintain it and remove some sediment is now $25,000 to rehab it. So deferred maintenance has a cost. And part of this program is to fund that maintenance to make sure we keep above that and maintain it so it functions as designed for flooding, water quality, so.
I'm good. Thank you very much.
Alan?
Welcome.
A couple of quick questions. Want to comment, being on private, so I'm not aware if, and I probably should be, if the town has rate programs or structures for low-income households or affordable units. I'd suggest that as we go forward, if we have those kind of structures for drinking water and sanitary sewer, that we would have those similar structures for stormwater as well. Is the intent of the fund and that $1.5 million target to be additive to what we historically budget on average for stormwater capital improvement projects?
Yes.
Okay, so when I look at, go back to the award-winning fiscal '23 budget book, the 5-year average for capital improvement projects for stormwater is about $575,000 a year. So adding this 1.5 million would bring us up to 2 million.
I think some of that would be covered in this now, I would think.
Or some of it would be covered in this. So
It would
I just,
still-
I'm,
would still
I'm not,
contribute.
I'm not complaining. I'm saying that's actually a good thing because it gets us close to that higher level of service,
Or does,
Right.
hopefully.
or does it, or
Does it?
or is the 575 not calculated in the
Yeah.
1.5 to get us to 2.2, whatever?
Yeah, I mean, I think the
Or further
historic
discussion.
funding has been more one-off projects, and but it's been frequent requests, so the goal is to have sustainable revenue, that's always there, and it's not always requested to the general fund. I guess that's something we still have to consider, I guess. I don't know if you want to
Just
speak more to that.
Yeah, I don't want to step on myself here, but I mean, the intent is, in my mind, but he'll correct me if I'm misinterpreting something, that we have this fund, and just like the water fund, we don't come to the town and ask for funding to pay for the water
Okay.
system. We go to the water fund to pay for the water, and it would be similar for this. We would go to the town and ask to appropriate money from the stormwater enterprise fund to pay for whatever the requirement is.
Okay, so we're still effectively tripling the,
What we're doing today.
what, the
Right.
current plan, the current
Projection.
thought
Yes,
is
if we're
roughly,
using that 5-year
but
average, yes.
using the 5-year average, we're looking at effectively tripling the funds available to do the work
Yes.
that needs to be done.
Yes,
There's no question it needs to be done, so. Okay, that's great.
Right.
yes. But it's doing work that
Yeah,
is not funded now.
correct,
so-
right. It's catching up and then maintaining and staying current and getting ahead.
Thank you for the presentation, fantastic. I really appreciate the data and the amount of work that went into this. I guess my question is, if you can go back to the slide called Stormwater Program Evaluation, it's slide a little further up, it has a chart on it with
I'll
it's got-
keep
it's
going,
got-
stop
it's got a
me
table-
when I'm there.
It's got a table on, right there, that's the one.
Okay.
So these program categories, I'm interpreting this, that these are positions that the town will be looking to fund. Is that correct?
So number one, category one is a position. Yes, that's a salary for an engineer. Two is maintenance, operation and maintenance, and that's primarily disposal of street sweepings, catch basin cleanings. There are some minor drainage repairs as part of that, some frame grate repairs, that sort of thing. So that's fairly minor. So these are not funding staff salaries. Only category one is salaries.
So in category 3, drainage, engineering, and stormwater, that's what, a contractor or something that we get? So we have a town planner engineering department. Does that person, does that job description have the skills to also do drainage engineering?
It's not really about skill set, it's more about capacity.
Okay.
And so, this is enhancing a program that is we're not fulfilling the need right now. So this funding would allow us to fulfill the need. But once you take on all that funding, you have to be able to manage it. So that's what that person is intended to do. So it's not about the skill set, it's about the ability the staff capacity to handle the projects associated with, or the work associated with it.
So it would be a program manager plus an engineering capability in line item 1 there, if I'm understanding correctly.
Yes, as well as somebody, item 1, yes, somebody so they're not doing the engineering, they're administering the program. I mean, even if you hire us to do the engineering, somebody has to manage us and work with us to help execute a project.
Makes sense.
They could be doing inspections. So part of this is inspecting certain assets. They could be doing that. Permit compliance, that's another aspect of it. The engineering piece, yes, your town engineer probably has the capability for most of it, but we have teams that can design something in 6 months to put it out to bid. They just don't have the capacity. They can't do wetlands delineation survey. Those are different skill sets. So there are some different skill sets to get a project through design and permitting and out to public bid.
Excuse me, sorry. This is actually consistent with our staffing study. So our non-public safety staffing study called for a stormwater management position within the engineering department, in addition to establishing this stormwater utility fund.
Okay. Next question was on the flat rate data. So I just want to make sure I understand. It talks about square footage, and I think of that as the house, right? Square footage of the house, that's how we build it. But is this not square footage of the impervious area that we're talking about here? And does the town, if that is what we're talking about here, does the town have that data if we were to choose to go with that methodology?
Yeah. So it is impervious area only. So it has nothing to do with the livable space of the property.
Roof.
So it's the footprint. So basically, looking straight down, what do you see? It's the roof perimeter, driveway, sidewalk, patio. But so the challenge with going to a smaller building unit of 1,000 square feet, the data's pretty good. So we have real data on every property. We've got a database, and I can tell you we've got 4,200 square feet in this property, 5,000 over here. But there's a quality of data plus or minus a few hundred square feet. And so sometimes some properties can be off substantially. 1,000 kind of gets us out of that noise and resolution issue. But if we go to 1,000, we'd probably want to do some refinement of data. Not so much on residential because it just doesn't change much. Even if you're missing half the driveway, it's only 500 square feet-ish or whatever. A non-residential property that has 200,000 square feet we can miss a sliver on that property, and it adds up to several billion units. So in that instance, with that rate structure, we typically refine the data for the non-residential parcels because there's the biggest change. So the data is generated by Mass GIS. We refine it from there, but it's based on imagery, interpretation of that for different land cover types. So there's a methodology to that, but when you have tree canopy and you have other issues, it sometimes skews the data a little bit. So.
Sure.
And that costs money to update, right? So,
yeah,
and it costs money to manage it at that level.
yeah, I just wanted to understand if how that data is accumulated and if we had access to it, and that
Yep.
answers my question.
Yep.
Apologies if you already answered this question, but municipal buildings, how would those be dealt with? We have a lot of municipal buildings, town with a lot of impervious data. How do those factor into the
Yeah.
equation?
Yeah, so communities, so this is a policy decision, and it's defensible both ways, really. You just like your municipal building uses water, you pay a water bill. Where does that come from? It comes out of the general fund, right? The same, sort of methodology has been applied in a lot of communities with stormwater utilities is you bill yourself for your own properties, but then you need to increase your budget to pay for that, right? So we did calculate what that looks like. And we do that because we haven't made a final decision on that, but municipal properties, under the tiered rate structure approach, it's about $96,000 that would have to come out of the general fund to pay for that. And so a lot of people's minds like, well, that doesn't make sense, right? So we're doing this so that we can move away from a general fund approach. However, from a utility enterprise standpoint, the logic applies. But we also could use that same logic to say, well, we don't charge ourselves for roads because that's the stormwater system right there. It's in the road system. Everybody uses municipal property, so everybody's paying for it anyway. So, we've seen where communities don't charge themselves. And we just got to make sure that we make a decision about that. But for now we calculated it.
Thank you. And then I guess finally, on your next step slide, I'm curious if you can provide a little more detail around the public engagement and what that process will look like.
Yeah, good question. I'll just step back for a second here. Chris mentioned the second meeting here to really kind of talk about next steps, implementation. What does that really look like? What does that cost? What's the time frame for that? That public engagement, we referenced, some outreach and engagement in January, February. If the town's planning to bring this before town meeting, we'd want to have engagement leading up to that. So different engagement strategies, this is where, we haven't formulated an engagement plan yet, but some communities choose to go all in and drown people in information. Sometimes that prompts a lot more questions, and it's more challenging for people to chew through. But we need to provide enough information that people feel comfortable. If there's certain sensitive groups that you think may be more outspoken, we could do targeted meetings with them. A couple of general meetings, open meetings, informational flyers, website information, some presentations online. There's a lot of resources out there. We haven't crafted that, but I've seen a lot of different approaches. Sometimes people say, well, let's form a committee. We know how that goes, right? It takes time. And it does take a different level of investment to have someone like myself or another firm, a PR firm possibly, facilitate that, right? So it's kind of like, what do we think is most appropriate for Westborough? We need to have some level of engagement, but we need to think about the timing too. So that's where, what do we think tonight? Is this something that makes sense to advance? And then we'll iron out those details on engagement based upon what we think we're going to do for town meeting, if we plan to take any action and provide a warrant article at that time.
Yeah, I'm not sure about the rest of the board, but I think it absolutely is something that needs to be advanced. It makes a lot of sense. Your data is compelling and the need is compelling. My 2 cents on public engagement, I'll just give you some suggestions. And certainly, Christy, I'd love to hear your feedback. We are just beginning the process of our master plan implementation team. And that would be a great forum to have come in and start a roadshow with in regards to different committees that you might want to engage with to talk about this and get feedback on, because that particular committee is looking at a lot of different things, and some of it touches this topic in regards to our roads and our water and whatnot. So, but thank you again for the presentation. Yeah. It's very informative, and I look forward to hearing more on this.
Certainly, you're welcome.
Yeah, I guess I'd gauge, I don't have questions. I have the benefit of sitting through and helping proofread and make suggestions on this ahead of time and ask my questions, so I'm not going to go back. But actually, there were new questions here that we didn't ask, but that they were great, so thank you all for that. So I guess I've heard from Patrick. I guess I'd look for others' thoughts. Personally, myself, I think this makes sense. to move this forward, have them come back to us to another meeting, but I look to others to their thoughts.
And I would say we should move forward with this in part because if we don't create the utility, then this will always be tax-based. And as demonstrated here, there's a higher level, we can achieve a better level of equity based on who contributes usage by creating the utility and using other measures to determine how these projects and how this ongoing operations and maintenance is paid for. So I definitely think we should continue to look forward.
I'm in agreement as well. Job well done. Thank you very much. A lot to think about here, but definitely worth moving forward. Thank you.
Shelby, any thoughts?
Yeah, I had a quick question and then my thoughts. The numbers that you provided in terms of kind of cost per asset, are those current dollars? Is there an inflationary swag in there?
So, no. I would say current.
Okay.
I mean, they're not based upon bid items in town. Some of those are, they're numbers I came up with.
Yep.
Some of those are based upon recent DOT bids,
Okay.
so state bids.
So they're current.
Pretty typical.
Okay.
It kind of depends, are you doing 5 catch basins at once or 50?
Sure.
You get economies of scale and competitive bids and so on. There's no escalation, so
Yep.
Things don't get cheaper over time,
Yep.
right? So.
Okay, and my answer is yes, absolutely. I think this is certainly compelling and it makes sense. And, you know, I think it's an investment in our future for all the obvious reasons.
Perfect. So I think, yep, Derek.
I just had a couple quick comment. Like when we're doing all our repaving every year too, if I just think about the paving that we did in 2022, the amount of drainage improvements that had to be done to facilitate the paving, that all came out of Chapter 90. And it's well north of $100,000 that we spent on collectively on all the roads. Well, that's $100,000 plus that is not being put towards paving because we had to fix the drainage first in order to facilitate the paving. That would come from this. And that is more paving that can be spread throughout the community that we get through Chapter 90 as well. So it's another way of looking at it.
Perfect.
And historically, I think it was 2005 or 2006, I brought this to the then town coordinator about this fee. So it's something that's interested me a long time based on my knowledge of the community and what our assets are and what needs to be done. So.
No, thank you. Thank you for sticking with it too. No, I know as we talk about the thing too, I mean, we as a group know, we've had flooding situations, we have culverts that fail, and when they do, they're emergency projects, I think as the talk started, this is really about being more proactive than what we have been, which has really been reactive, and not a knock on DPW or conservation or anybody over time. It's just the resources haven't been there, so this puts the resources there. So hopefully we don't have those situations where we have those emergency culvert replacements or other things going on. So I think you got your marching orders to move forward with this and think about that engagement plan. I think it is something, I know that us as a board are very interested in that. It's something we get comments from the public about doing that. I think it also is, if we're gonna bring the bylaw forward, and we think we're ready for it in March in terms of that timing, we have a much better chance of getting it passed if we have the public engagement ahead of time. If we don't, it makes it much more difficult, so.
Can I just add one more comment in terms of the future? So based on your guidance tonight, which was very helpful, we can now come up with a strategy for the next meeting and the outcomes of the next meeting and the way forward. One thing that is important for us all to remember is that, as I said up front, you know, the work that was just briefed, that was paid for through a grant, but anything moving forward, there's costs, and so we, you know, part of the town meeting, if this all packages for town meeting, there's an ask at town meeting for funding to help us implement this over the next 9, 10, 12, 15, whatever the number of months is. And I just want to make sure that's known, like this isn't the end, this is the kind of the beginning, and there's costs associated with which will all, you know, pay us back in the end, but we just got to understand that that's part of part of the package.
Chris, to be clear then, so there would be an ask from you at town meeting for, whatever, design, planning, study, whatever the.
Funding to support implementation.
Okay.
Should it be something we,
Okay.
pursue.
And do we have a ballpark of what that is at this point? And don't feel like you
Yeah,
have to.
I don't know, but
Okay. Yep.
I don't know, but
Okay.
it's,
That'll be part of our next meeting, I'm sure.
yeah.
We can-
Yeah, I mean, I
I
don't,
just want it known that there's asks
Okay.
coming,
I mean, I guess if the number's crazy, then I'd say I might regret what I'm about to say, but to me, we have to do it. And if this work so far is an example of what we can expect as part of implementation, then it's money well spent. But I still want to know the number.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
You might change your
Right, I might change that comment, but yes, no. But that makes sense, and I appreciate you being transparent about that to get there, we're going to have to invest.
And one other comment, and this is, again, a future meeting, and I know we want to finish this up, but the bylaw, so there's the bylaw and there's implementation, and there's ways to kind of do that separately, but I think our approach going in, at least, is that we want to kind of push that bylaw, because we don't want to spend 8 months spending money, and then we get to the end and we decide to vote against it, right? I mean, we've just wasted all that money. So we want to kind of do them in tandem if we can. That way we have the endorsement of the town while we're spending money, making the process or implementing the process. So that's the logic. We could always change that. That's a future discussion, but that's kind of our going in position. So,
Makes sense.
thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Chris, if you want to stay that, I'm going to go to 8, because I think that's helpful for you to have that. And ARPA too, or? Okay. And then we'll go back, I think, Shabbat Westborough here. Okay. So, the lead services line inventory. This is, so at the October town meeting, the town voted to authorize the board to move forward with, I think it's lead services, not lead services.
Yep, so this is really.
I know, I was wondering, what one is it?
It's,
Lead or lead?
So we've already we've already been approved essentially to move forward with this grant opportunity. This is really administrative. We need Christy to be authorized to sign this agreement that allows us to start this process. And so we're asking you to authorize Christy to sign a piece of paper that allows us to submit for this grant and then start the process.
Perfect. And it was voted on town meeting, so can I have a motion for that?
So I move pursuant to Article 17 of the October 17, 2022 special town meeting to authorize the town manager to file the application with the Massachusetts Department of Environmental Protection for state financial assistance for drinking water protection projects and execute any documents necessary to complete the lead services line and replacement plan project.
Seconded.
Okay, any further comments? Okay, all those in favor? 5-0, 5 being present. Christie, sign away.
Thank you.
Let's move to the ARPA projects. Christie, you want to hit this one?
So as the board is aware, you awarded several ARPA projects in the spring of this past year, and we did have a remaining balance at the time. As we've moved through some of the ARPA projects, we did send out a third form to anyone who had been awarded money, asking if there was any additional need for funding, because we've been hearing that there was a few projects that had some additional need for funding. So we did receive 4 of those forms, and we discussed them at the finance team meeting. 2 of them, we needed some additional information before we were ready to recommend them to move forward. But the other 2, we felt comfortable, even with these 2 sort of forms outstanding, to recommend that the form that was submitted by both the school department and the Department of Public Works be recommended to the Advisory Finance Committee, who in turn have recommended to the Select Board for approval at their December 5th meeting. So if both of these are approved, the town will have a remaining balance in ARPA of approximately $170,000. So the two projects in front of you are $21,360.03 to the school department to fund additional costs associated with the Armstrong emergency roof replacement repair. They did have 5 change orders on that project. They funded 4 of them through their budget, and then this 5th one, which is adding some drainage, would be funded through ARPA if you award it. And then for the Department of Public Works, in order for them to move forward with the chlorine booster station project, their estimate has increased by $120,428, and so they're asking for the additional ARPA funds to move forward with that work.
Any questions on that?
I move to award $21,360.03 to the school department to fund additional costs associated with the Armstrong Emergency Roof Replacement Project, $120,428 to the Department of Public Works to fund costs associated with the chlorine booster station project.
Second?
All those in favor? 5-0, 5 being present. Thank you. Chris, thank you. So moving back to the folks from Shabbat Westborough here. Hi. Can you just introduce yourself and?
So my name is Mendy Green. My dad is Rabbi Michael Green from Chabad of Westborough. He's not here, so kind of taking his place. We wanted to put up a menorah at the center of the rotary over here, starting from, let's say, tonight, or Hanukkah starts Sunday night. So we want to have it up the whole Hanukkah and take it down. Well, Hanukkah ends, what is it, the 26th? So it's going to be really hard for us to get a few people to come on the 27th, and also because of the holiday season, and it goes till Saturday Shabbat, so we can't do anything. So I wanted to know if we could get an authorization to have it up till January 1st, that's like, what is it, 2 weeks or something. And I understand that maybe in past years or a year or two ago, like, we mistakenly had it up for a little too long, and I just want to I want to reassure that we'll have that under control. We have a couple of guys that are willing to come after those 2 weeks. So let's say from tonight or tomorrow, whenever you guys give the authorization, till January 1st. And if not, if need be, we'll try to get people to come 27th, 28th, or whatever. But if you guys we'd rather January 1st.
Okay. Now, is there any, I think in the past you've asked for kind of on the initial night of kind
Event.
of a public thing, is that also?
Yeah, that was the second thing. So, what was it, January 18th at 3:30 p.m.
December.
Sorry.
I'm sorry, December 18th at 3:30 p.m. We're inviting the entire community, Jewish people and also not Jewish people that we know. We want to make it very kind of diversified and all inclusiveness and everything. Kind of make it like a celebration of Hanukkah for the entire town of Westborough. And yeah, I think in the past years, maybe you guys sent like an officer or two or something just for protection. I think there was a concern maybe a year or two ago. My dad told me that you guys were concerned about children or something, or, I don't think we're going to be bringing the children this year. So there's nothing to worry about that. And obviously, me and my brother and a few friends, responsible adults, will be there and making sure everything is safe and no one's running into the street.
Over to the board for questions.
So
Mm-hmm.
we have a letter from Chabad of Central Mass that says you're no longer affiliated with Chabad. And so are you here representing a different organization, a different nonprofit in Westborough, or yourself as individuals?
Okay, so that's a little bit of a complicated topic. but we still have our organization of Chabad of Westborough. The Central Chabad organization in Brooklyn, based in Brooklyn, New York City, officially, it's a little bit of a complicated system, but a lot of people get delisted, but still like have the authorization to call themselves Chabad. And it's not like they completely like invalidated our entire organization. It's just they delisted us from their official list of, it's called Chabad Shluchim, Chabad emissaries. It's also like a very historic thing, the Chabad Rebbe, the Chabad dynasty based in Brooklyn. And it goes into a lot of, deeper things, but like for just the surface base, the organization is still, it's still going on, and it's, valid, it's still a nonprofit. The Chabad headquarters doesn't necessarily have authorization to invalidate the nonprofit. That's more of like a state thing or a government thing, So that's still going on. So yeah, and we still service the community, and people we know are still kind of banking on us to let them celebrate Hanukkah. We also have a lot of non-Jewish friends in the community too that come. It's it's kind of like the celebration of Hanukkah for the Westborough community.
Questions or?
So just to be clear, so
Mhm.
you're coming to us as representative of Chabad Westborough?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
All right. Ellen, did you have other
Well,
questions?
I mean, the communications we've had from Rabbi Fogelman was a concern to make it very clear that Rabbi Green was not representing Chabad in any way, shape, or form. So I'm sharing that.
Right.
Well, I could say also that I have a lot of friends, like I'm very well affiliated with the Chabad community, and I have a lot of friends that for whatever reason they were delisted from the Chabad emissary list, and some of them kind of changed their names to the Jewish Center or the Chai Center or different types of names. Some kept their names, retained their name Chabad. Chabad, it's an acronym. It's in Hebrew, Chachma Bina Dat, which is wisdom, understanding, and knowledge. Happens to be that there is an actual organization called Chabad, but it's more of just like sharing and celebrating, community and Jewish holidays and the Shabbat dinners. And I mean, whether or not we should be calling ourselves Chabad after we officially got delisted, I'm not sure if that has to do with this conversation, but we're definitely servicing the community Jewish-wise, whether it's officially Chabad or not Chabad, and the community is still erect, we still service the Westborough community.
Can I just back to just the kind of the actual celebration itself that is planned. I'm not sure how you would exclude children from participating, right? To your point, you want it to be inclusive, and
Right.
obviously there are children that are
Yeah.
in the community and of the faith, and so I would, I don't know how many folks you're anticipating for that event.
I would say probably around maybe 30 to 40.
Okay. All right.
Sometimes 20, depends on the year.
So I don't have to, I'm sure, since you're close to the downtown, to have to tell you how dangerous the Rotary can be.
Yeah.
So if there's not a planned police detail, which does not sound like there is, I would just make sure that, we wouldn't want a celebration to turn into a tragic
Right.
event. So,
Yeah. I will definitely make sure, like maybe even assign like certain, like a responsible adult by each of the sidewalk endings, just to always be there, kind of to be in place of the police patrol.
And so just as a follow-on then, so appreciate that you're able to be here, that your father isn't. Is he so who is in charge of the event? I mean, you're here representing the Chabad, but
Right.
is he gonna be in charge, like who,
Like on premises?
yeah, like the celebration itself?
So it's me and my brother Moshe, and I'm Mendy.
Okay.
So, well, I'm just the older brother, so I came to represent. But me and him are both kind of gonna run the event, make sure everything goes as planned, and bring all the kosher food, the Hanukkah donuts, and
Okay.
we're also gonna be putting it up with your authorization.
Yep. Okay.
So yeah, we're basically responsible for it.
Okay, super. And the only other comment I would make is that I think it was 2 years ago, there was a sign on it, we don't allow advertising, so it can't say about Westborough, can't be a phone number, right? I think it,
Correct.
right,
No advertising.
no
Okay.
advertising, so I just want to make sure that
Sure.
is not, an issue.
Can we put a sign with the date of the
Yep.
of the event, or is that considered advertising?
I think it's advertising.
Advertising. I mean, I remember. I mean, I've been at the Hanukkah events ever since I was a little boy.
Yeah.
I moved here when I was like 3 or something. So I remember every single year we did have, if I remember correctly, we had like a sign up. I think it's a Chabad, or maybe it just said
Well, so the
Chabad.
policy is, sorry,
Yeah.
the policy has changed in terms of what
Oh, okay.
the select board allows, so certainly since you were a little
Yeah.
one. So it's been updated in the past, actually, I think, about a year or so. ago.
October of 21, and I did send it to Devorah.
Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense.
So just, I think the issue, as I recall, was that there was, about Westborough, there was a sign and like a phone number. So that just, I think last year it was, I don't know if it was a white piece of tape, it wasn't there, and that's fine. I just want to make sure someone doesn't go, oh, why is this not on here?
Right.
And then that becomes sort of an issue.
Right.
Okay.
Okay, so just to be clear and specific, you do allow a sign just without the name Chabad and without the number? Could we say, we wish you a happy Hanukkah and the date of the event, or just like to be very specific?
Yeah, I mean, I think we wish you a happy Hanukkah and the date of the event is fine.
And like just we wish you, or Chabad wishes you, or the Jewish community wishes you, like what is,
That's a good question.
what's forbidden, what's permitted?
I mean, by the letter of I'm just looking at our policy, advertisements are prohibited. So examples such as phone numbers, websites, and other contact information.
So
Okay,
I think wishing you a happy Hanukkah is pretty,
okay,
Yes.
without the word Chabad?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, that's
Yeah.
fair enough.
if that's,
Again, this is related to being on public property,
Right,
so.
I understand. Okay, and about the taking it down, or the date, like till when do you guys authorize?
Yeah, just a couple of questions, one quick question for you.
Sure.
Since it's on the rotary, I'm just curious, it's a lighted display, how does it get lit? How is it solar powered, how does?
Electricity, I
So-
think we plug it into that
So the
little.
town, it's plugged into the town power supply, okay, just wanted to
Yeah, I think it's
understand
the same power, electricity that powers the
lights on
Christmas
trees.
lights. Yeah,
that. Okay, that makes
if I'm
sense.
not mistaken.
I would just to that end, I would, because there's a very different light display up there now, I would just make sure that that's coordinated with, I mean, I know it's, the menorah only has a couple candles,
Yeah.
it's a very small, but I have no idea what the light display is, so I think our DPW director, who is, I think he's gone now at this point, but you guys may want to reach out to that office to make sure that, all I'm saying is the light display that's on there now is more complex than it has been in the past year, so.
So you're saying there might not be enough?
Well,
power or
I
whatever?
have no idea.
You don't want to unplug one and plug
Yeah.
the other.
Ah, okay,
Yeah,
okay,
and I'm
yeah,
not saying, I
sure,
know
sure.
you wouldn't, I really don't know what the setup is down there,
Okay, yeah,
so.
I'll definitely, what's the department that I have to?
Department of Public Works,
Public Works,
and
okay.
you would just call, do you know the number offhand?
I think if you have questions and come into our office,
Yeah.
and I'm
Sorry.
looking at Sheila here, not to dump
Okay.
everything on her, but we do. But coming into the office, talk to Sheila, and she can direct you to the
Okay.
numbers, whatever.
Thank you. Yeah.
But I think it's checking in with DPW. I think we should definitely check in with the police if this
Okay.
moves forward and gets
And then I would just make a comment about the timing, which I think is what you were looking for.
Right.
I don't hear a compelling reason why we should extend it an additional week. I can see an additional day, before and after, but, I think it's important that we maintain as clear an area in the Rotary as possible. I certainly appreciate the display and we'll enjoy it once it's put up, but I think it's important that we have these observances for the period of time that they're supposed to be there, so.
Yeah, okay.
I would
Well,
agree with that.
Well, if it's going up like 3-ish days before, it seems,
I was going to suggest the 15th to the 28th. That's 2 days before and 2 days after.
I think that makes sense.
Well, right now it's the 13th, right? So the
15th
15th
is
will be
Thursday.
Friday. Oh, it's Thursday, right? Okay.
So it gives you Thursday and,
If we put the 15th and you don't put it up to the 16th, that's fine.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
right.
I gotcha.
And then, the 28th gives you 2 full days
Okay.
after.
So that would be, is it Tuesday?
That's a Tuesday and Wednesday.
Wednesday.
The 20th is a Wednesday.
Is Wednesday.
27th is a Tuesday.
Okay.
Yeah, I think as you said, Hanukkah is even it's December 18th and 26th, as you said.
Yep.
So that,
Right.
yeah.
You're serving food?
Kind of like
Yes.
light refreshments, I would say maybe hot cocoa, donuts, the chocolate little maybe latkes, the fried potato patties. Probably not much else. Maybe some cookies.
Okay. In past years, the request has come in after there's been a conversation with the Board of Health related to food service.
What's that?
The rules about serving food,
Mhm.
has that been, have you reviewed your plans with the Board of Health?
I probably should ask my dad or my parents if they. I'm honestly not sure. My brother might know. Is that something that I should be? Like, if we haven't, checked in with them, I should be doing that, right? Or,
Yeah, I mean, typically the Board of Health would, for example, when the downtown winter lights, which was canceled this year because of weather, there's there's going to be hot chocolate and candy canes are given out. So that is presented to the Board of Health in advance so that they're aware of that request.
okay, and if we don't get authorization from the Board of Health, then we definitely can. Okay, no,
Thank you.
that's fair enough. Just to put things in place so there's 2 departments that I have to
Yep.
talk to.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, it's really for your protection, the town's protection too.
Right.
Make sure it's safe and follows
Yeah.
right protocols for serving food, et cetera.
I understand.
Okay.
Question for Christie, given the timing, can the health director handle the permit request?
I believe so. So I think when you make your motion, at the end of the first sentence, I would just say that, or at the end of the entire motion, you would just make it subject to approval from Board of Health, Police Department, and DPW, and then we can help coordinate that communication.
Okay.
So is there a motion?
Sure.
The
I'll
motion
make it.
actually has the incorrect date. Sorry, that's the 18th.
Okay.
I'll make it. I move to approve the display of the menorah on the town's rotary from December 15th, 2022 until December 28th, 22, in conjunction with the approval and coordination with the Board of Health and the DPW, with the removal to occur no later than the end of the business day on December 28th, and further to approve the public menorah lighting on December 18th from
3:30.
3:30 to
4:30?
Yeah, I guess an hour is good. Yeah, maybe 5 is better.
5 o'clock, with no advertising on the menorah, with no advertising permitted on the menorah.
I think we,
Goodness.
I think the other piece is just making sure the police are in the loop as to what's happening.
Well, subject to approval from police, DPW, and the Board of, and the health director.
And is that incumbent on me to check up, or
Yes.
so I have to go to the department, the police department? Okay.
Yeah, yeah. For
Making
both just when you're going to bring the menorah and place it, and when you're gonna remove it, kind of rough time frame, so they're aware of that, and
Okay.
as well as just the celebration and the plan.
Okay.
Anything else? All those in
Oh,
favor?
I'm sorry, Ann, does the motion need to include who we're authorizing? It just says move to approve, it doesn't say, like,
It's the request, so.
okay, okay, just wanna make sure.
It'll just be me, my brother, and those associated.
Yep, no, that's fine,
Friday.
I wanna make sure that, as we talk about all the details, we're good.
Okay.
Okay, thanks, Ian.
No problem. All those in favor?
Did we get a second?
Do we have a second? I thought, didn't we?
I second
You- oh, you
it,
did,
sorry,
okay.
sorry.
Okay, 5-0, 5 being present. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks for being here.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you.
You too. Happy Hanukkah.
Okay, apologies for folks at Shell, that's the next thing on our agenda. So, it's a request for a 2023 liquor license renewal fee waiver. Please come forward.
Good evening.
Evening.
Yeah, my name is Al and my wife is on, but says no feel good. That's why I'm here.
And I think the request here is requesting a waiver of the annual fee for renewal in 2023 because of the fee was paid when the license was transferred in beginning of September 2022.
Please,
Is that correct?
please, yes.
Okay. Chris, I think from our packet, this isn't something we would haven't done before, or?
I don't recall having done this before, and I'm not aware of any policy that the board has related to proration so for the requirement, or the requirement to pay for the 2023 license is typical of the process.
Okay,
I'm sorry, when was it, sorry, I was trying to find the information. It was paid on when?
September 1st.
September 1st, okay. And the next fee would be due,
So that's an annual fee?
Yep.
They paid the full annual fee but they paid for the transfer, and then they used it for 4 months,
Yep.
and then the next fee is for the 2023, the use of the license in 2023.
You remember what the fee is?
yes, thank you.
Sorry, sorry to interrupt you.
$1,200.
If they hadn't transferred this, would that September payment have covered them through September of next year?
No, it's calendar year.
It's just a calendar, so that would just come.
So this is a section 15? Okay, so it's 1250 for wine and malt.
So I'm sorry, what code word were you just
So
speaking?
section, there's,
The type
I'm looking on the
of
website for
license,
liquor
it's
licenses. If
Okay.
it's a section 15, which I guess is off-premise, wine and malt is $1,250 per year.
But that is also the cost to transfer a license?
Right. So you pay the cost when you transfer the license.
Right, because there's administration, yeah. And what is, just, Ian, if I may?
Yep, please go
So
ahead.
just what is the reason for asking for the fee to be waived? Being that you know that it's an annual fee?
I just request.
Okay.
I guess,
Well,
I have a comment, right?
yeah,
in
go
that
ahead.
if you're purchasing a business from someone else and they've prepaid the fee for the year and you have, and then you have to pay the full year fee, then I would expect that any compensation for the fact that you're covering that cost would be negotiated as part of the purchase and sale of the business. And that we don't have, we don't have a policy that prevents it, we also don't have a policy that allows it. And I expect that if we waive the fee or approve the prorate, then we will be facing these requests, every time a liquor license transfers. When, that's, it's reasonable to expect that would, be part of the purchase and sale. I think, we're a fortunate community as far as our quota of licenses and things of that nature. We don't have, we don't have auctions for liquor licenses by private businesses that are shutting down
Right.
to sell the liquor license and things. We don't need that, but, I would expect that this would have been negotiated as part of the PNS.
Yeah, I mean, I think my take here is exactly what you said, is that where there's not a policy, I appreciate the request for it, but I'm not inclined to make a motion in support of waiving the fee. I agree. I think it's a precedent we haven't set. We don't have a policy to do that. So personally, that's my take, would just be not to approve it.
Yeah, I mean, I appreciate the ask, it's worth asking, but I would also not be inclined to grant any sort of reprieve.
Okay, I may think our policy here would be if board members want to, they can make a motion. If for lack of a motion, it means that it's declined, so I would open up if anybody chooses to make a motion.
Thank you for coming.
All right,
for
thank
coming
you.
before us.
Merry
but
Christmas.
Yes.
Yeah, Merry Christmas. Merry Christmas.
Never
Good luck.
hurts to ask.
Thanks. Okay, as we mentioned earlier, the mobile station Class 2 license renewal hearing has been postponed at the request of the business to our next meeting. So next on our agenda, now we're ahead of schedule, but if they're here, is the request of DSC Auto at 1 Brigham Street for relief from zoning bylaw section 4400. You've been here waiting for a little.
No, that's okay. How are y'all doing? I'm Melissa Strosio. My husband Dan is the owner of the business. I kind of just do the administrative things. So I guess we got the letter back in August about the lot. We rent, we're right on 1 Brigham Street, and we have no parking at all at that location. So we rent a lot that I think it's right next door to 9 East Main. And so we were hoping we could get requests from the bylaw to park more than 1 vehicle. I put the number as 10, as, just, I guess, kind of up to 10 to be on the safe side, because we do have a lot of unregistered vehicles that just kind of cycle through the shop during the repair process. We don't sell cars or anything like that, but we just repair like car dealerships. We'll do a lot of work for dealerships where they'll drop off cars, and sometimes they're sitting for a few days, while we're waiting for parts, or just to get them in the shop, and then they might sit a few days before they come pick them up. As well as we do, people buy a new car, we might do some work on it or inspect it before it's registered. And so we often at times have, more than 1 vehicle that's unregistered that needs to sit in our lot for a few days. So yeah, that's kind of been an issue. So that's what we were hoping, that we could increase the number. Excuse me.
Okay. Other questions from the board?
Yes.
Alan?
I assume to get the cars from 1 Brigham Street over to the lot, you're either towing them or putting repair tags?
Yeah, we do have a repair plate.
So you have
That we
one
do
repair
use.
plate?
Currently, yes.
Okay. I guess the question is, if you're looking to be able to park, the zoning is about unregistered vehicles.
Yeah.
If there's a repair plate on the vehicle, it's considered registered.
Mm-hmm.
I'm wondering why, if you need 10, have you thought about just getting the additional 9 repair tags? The research I did said that they're $20 a vehicle per year. with a minimum of $100. So the cost for one repair tag versus 5 is $100. The next 5 would be another $100. I guess
Sorry, can you say that again? Because I'm trying to think, I think I just renewed and it was 150 for one, so I just,
So looking at the RMV website,
yep.
and maybe that information's out of date, it says that repair plates are $20 per plate. I believe you need one per vehicle, and there's a minimum $100 fee per year. So if you have one plate, you're paying $100. If you have 5 plates, my understanding is you're paying $100. To get repair tags for potentially 10 cars would be $200 a year. And I guess I'm asking if you looked at that simply, zoning relief is there, really as a last resort when there's no other way to accomplish what you want to accomplish. And, even if it's $300 a year, that doesn't seem like an unreasonable business expense.
Right.
To avoid having to provide zoning relief, which could create a precedent for
I see, yeah.
other shops, other, auto repair facilities looking to increase their storage of unregistered vehicles.
That makes sense. I mean, I'll look into that. I actually have no idea, but I think I just applied to renew our one plate, and I believe it was 150, but I could be off on that. I will look into that and see.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I would, so Alan, I appreciate that suggestion and you doing that research. I would be, I'm concerned with like permanent zoning relief. And I do view that as a last resort. It's odd even that it's coming before this board, but as we know, because we've done our research, that's where this lies. So I would not be supportive of a permanent zoning relief. If the repair tag option, as Alan has suggested, isn't an option, then, we might contemplate, a revisited in a year, although that creates a maintenance process for everyone. I know you have a lease, to use the property, so that doesn't come without complications. So I'm hoping we can kind of find another solution. My other, I'm also curious to know, and Christy, maybe this is a question for you, just that for use of a lot like this, that Conservation and Board of Health, and maybe it's not for the Board of Health, I don't know, but wouldn't have any concerns with sort of cars that need repair, fuel spillage, it was surprising to me to see that there were no concerns, if I understood our packet correctly.
Yep, so we reached out to Conservation, Board of Health, Fire Department, and there were no identified concerns.
Okay.
I think that to your point about spillage, if there was repair work being done on the property, that would certainly create that concern.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, I guess, I am not an expert here, but neither is Google, but just, quick was, repair plate is issued to a repair shop to allow the repairer to drive unregistered vehicles on the road for testing. I don't know if there would be an issue with using a repair plate to sit on a lot. And that it's also property uses by a dealer, use of a customer for sale or demonstration purposes, but by law cannot do so for more than 5 consecutive days.
A dealer plate,
Yeah.
which is different than a repair plate.
Oh, sorry, that's a dealer plate, yep. Yeah, so I don't know, sorry, good catch on that one. But,
So,
I've got the January 2022 fee schedule
so,
for section 5.
So let's say they apply and they get the 10 repair tags. They don't have the space at their shop for the cars, so they're placing them upon agreement in this other parking lot, the repair tag doesn't necessarily apply to this other lot, though, correct? Does it have, to? I mean,
The repair tag applies to the vehicle.
and so
If
as long
it's
as
not-
it has
if
a
the
repair
tag's on the
tag,
vehicle, it's considered a
So
registered
you'd no
vehicle.
longer
it
have
can
an
be
But it's a,
anywhere.
It's an
I guess I'm a little confused here. I'm not sure I understand the significance of a repair plate to zoning. The repair plate is intended to make sure that the vehicle, when it's on the road and it's moved, it allows the repair shop to legally move that car on a public roadway. It's gonna do nothing to minimize, or I'll say, allow us to maintain 10 cars on that lot. That lot can handle more than 10 cars. So is the expectation, because I'm less concerned about repair plates. They're gonna move one car, they've got only, I don't know how many car bays in there, they're gonna only move over so many cars a day to work on them as they can work on them. I'm more worried about the physical appearance of the lot. I don't want broken down cars sitting down there, and I get it that there's screening available today, but those shrubs could die a year from now, and we would see that, right? So I'm more concerned about that. But, so I guess, please explain to me why it's important that we have repair plates if they're only gonna be moving one car at a time to do their business.
So the zoning relates to the number of unregistered vehicles parked.
I get that, but these are not,
Having repair tags on the vehicles are registered.
they're not,
Making a zoning change and providing a zoning variance attaches to the property.
they're not registered. A repair plate simply that plate is never coordinated with the VIN number on that car to the registry for that temporary period of time that plate is put on that car. They can move the plate from car to car to car every single day.
Right, and there's a logbook,
Okay?
and the car has to be in general serviceable condition. And so there are requirements that the state of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts
For a repair plate to be
says,
on.
if a repair plate is on a vehicle, that vehicle is considered registered. Okay, and yes, it's intended so you can drive and test drive and things of that nature, but if a vehicle is parked with a repair tag on it, it remains a registered vehicle. My concern with the zoning is that the zoning variance attaches to the property. And so we issue a zoning variance. The zoning variance doesn't go away if DSC is able to acquire property on Brigham Street and decides to store their cars there. The zoning variance stays with the property on East Main.
So I'm there with you on the zoning piece of it. I do not understand what requiring the business owner to go purchase, no matter if the fee is small or not, has to do with the zoning. You can move that repair, you could have 10 cars sitting on that lot, or 5, or whatever it is, and use one repair plate to do the job that they need to do to move those cars, test drive and whatnot, and that's fine. If we limit the zoning to 10 vehicles, 10 unregistered vehicles on that lot, the plates do nothing. It doesn't force them to do anything other than allow them to move their car from one location to another. That's all it does. Because they can take that one plate and go on 10 different cars during one day.
Right, and what I'm suggesting though is if the car is parked in that lot,
Yeah.
and it either has an owner's registration or it has a repair registration.
Well, it's owned by
tag.
in this case, the example she gave was that those cars would be coming from a dealer for them to work on. They are owned by that dealer. They are just not registered because they are not on the road.
Right, and so I'm saying that the repair shop, DSC, can effectively register the vehicle by putting and leaving a repair tag on that vehicle. And then we don't need to do the zoning variance that ties to the property as far as the number of unregistered vehicles.
But you are making the argument that says in order for you to approve this zoning change that
I'm saying we don't do the zoning change at all.
even if they got the 10 plates?
If they get the 10 plates, they don't need the zoning change because the vehicles are registered.
But they aren't registered.
But they are. Under the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, a vehicle is considered registered with repair tags.
So
That's why I'm suggesting it, is because it's an affordable way to avoid having to create a zoning variance that stays with the property in perpetuity.
Just to clarify that point, in discussion with the zoning enforcement officer, he recommended the type of motion that you have before you, which is that the relief would be granted to DSC Auto for the 45 East Main Street property as permitted by the owner of that property, so that it would tie to the current owners of the DSC business.
Not to the property.
And that's how he would interpret that, and that's how he's recommended it.
And I still see a risk of this setting a new precedent and having other repair shops and Class 2 dealerships then looking for zoning relief on the number of unregistered vehicles on their property or on properties they're leasing.
But if we, so even with what you're saying, Al, even if with what you're saying, Alan, even if you had 10 plates on that, all we're trying to do is manage and maintain that there are only 10 vehicles on that,
No,
regardless of.
no.
10 unregistered
We're,
Actually, it's any more than one.
right now, it is any more than one,
Right.
correct? That's just like anybody's property in town. I can't have more than one unregistered vehicle on my property. I get it. What I'm saying is, the registration or lack of registration, in my opinion, doesn't matter. It's the question of the volume of cars that are on that lot. Are we gonna?
But that's not the question before us.
Right. The zoning is specific to number of unregistered vehicles.
They're allowed much more than.
Right,
So you could fill that lot with registered vehicles.
right, yes,
Right.
Okay.
exactly. So,
Yeah.
Right, but that's not up for
And that's
discussion
Alan's
here.
point, is that if all those vehicles were registered, either to an owner or with a repair
then
tag,
it doesn't matter. You don't have to
then
change the zoning.
there would be no, right,
I get it.
okay.
The motion before us, though, is to change the zoning to 10,
No, it's to grant relief.
to grant relief, excuse me.
Right, to provide a variance. And I'm not sure, if there's additional resource.
I
and
think
repair
Alan's
tax
trying to
doesn't
find a
work,
way
A
to make
way
this
around
work.
Yeah,
I want it to work for them in a way that's manageable and affordable administratively, cost-wise.
But that doesn't set a
without-
precedent.
That doesn't set a precedent for zoning variances and relief with respect to unregistered vehicles related to dealerships and repair shops. And so, I guess if there needs to be additional research on whether the repair tag solution is viable, I like that. But
The
if
zoning-
not,
Yeah.
you know, and if it can't work for a specific reason, come back before us and tell us, and then we can discuss the need for relief. My point is, given that I believe repair tags provide a non-burdensome way to comply with the current zoning, there's not a need for zoning relief at this time.
yeah, my question is more fundamental. Do we want 10 unregistered, or do we want 10 vehicles on the lot down there?
Well, if,
They're allowed.
But if they were all, if they were all registered, we have no say.
Right.
can the
So-
zoning enforcement officer help us, like, with this,
They have an agreement
help us
for
confirm
25
what we're talking about is,
cars in that lot.
Well, this is what he's put forward related to how you could grant relief. So that's all, he wouldn't, are you asking if he would have an opinion on registration tags?
on repair tags?
Repair tags?
Yeah.
Um,
It's an R&D question.
I'm not sure that that's a
Sorry,
question for the zoning enforcement officer.
I just wanted to say something. I'm sorry I'm late. I'm the owner, Dan Strozio, DSC Auto. I was just listening on the way in. You can't just get repair plates for $20. They cost, each repair plate costs, you have to insure it, the repair plate. So you can't have 10 repairs. That would cost, $15,000 maybe. It's $150 per plate plus the insurance on it,
Okay.
So you're not gonna be able to. And I just wanted to say, having unregistered cars is part of doing business on any repair shop. You're not gonna have, you can have a repair shop that just works on dealer cars only, and they're gonna have 10, 20 unregistered, cars. I've been doing this for 30 plus years, so every repair shop I've worked at has unregistered vehicles. At some point, you're gonna have 2, 3, 4, 6, whatever it is. You can't do business without having it's unusual for a repair shop not to. Curious what other businesses
Yeah,
in town
so-
are doing.
Okay,
I mean, if you go to a body shop, you'd have to go to every repair shop is gonna have unregistered cars. Yeah. Unless they're a one-man show, small pot, we're considered probably a medium to large, repair shop. So in my size repair shop, for an independent is, I see a lot of vehicles.
Okay,
So-
I guess I'm confused about the cost because I'm looking at the RMVs.
But you have to insure the plate. Every plate has to be insured. No insurance company is going to give you 10 plates for $20.
put them on cars,
Okay.
and you have to.
Yeah, then I drive
You get
around.
them on the
No,
road.
no one's gonna
That's
have
a
10
great
repair
point.
plates either. I
Right,
mean.
right.
The
So,
insurance company probably would not give it to you. I mean, the state
So
wouldn't, what
the
state
issue
wouldn't
isn't the
allow it.
plate, the issue isn't the plate fee with the RMV, it's the insurance of the vehicle as a registered vehicle.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know I've never heard of a repair shop having 10 plates.
It's not really easy to get the plates.
Yeah, it's the
you really
state
have
police
jump
have to come
through
down
hoops to get one plate.
to our location, approve it and all that. It's a long process.
so
But-
do we, I mean, is this something, is this sort of a bigger question around just our zoning bylaw as it relates to this specific item?
I don't understand the question.
Well, and again, I'm a little out of my space here, because I don't do your line of work, but
Right.
if, you're certainly not the only business that's doing this in town,
Right.
and, you know, you bring experience, and, I guess I'm just wondering, is our zoning bylaw representative of business, you know, normal business practices, and/or should it be? And when is the last time it was revisited? I mean, is this sort of like, you know, we were sort of joking a little bit earlier about that we have an insect and pest control appointment, right? Like, who knew? Like, is that a carryover from when we were highly agricultural? I have no idea, but I don't know where this zoning bylaw element comes from.
You actually bring up a really good question. Does this fall under spot zoning?
No,
This
No.
wouldn't fall under spot
No.
zoning?
no.
Okay.
I guess I'm just,
I think it's just a
Independent of-
difficult, it's new for this board because you don't typically deal with zoning and you certainly don't deal with relief. So I don't have any memory of anything like this coming before you. So for whatever reason, when this zoning bylaw was adopted, this is how it is. So if the board wants to send some sort of memo or request to the planning board to review this bylaw and, you know, related to this discussion, I think that makes sense, but this is the question before you right
Well,
now.
we could ask you to do that, but I think you're right. I think my thing is, the business has been working with the zoning enforcement officer. Didn't realize that you had a violation. We realized it, brought it to you, and from what I can see in our package, they've been working with you to try
Right.
to find ways to fix this. This is the recommendation that comes to us from the zoning enforcement officer. I think your question is very valid. I guess my take here would be to grant relief. I agree, I've never had this in front of us in my
Yeah.
12 years on the board, but I think it raises a question, because it raises a question in my mind, do we have, from what you just said, do we have violations all over town
Right.
that we just don't even know about, because with other repair shops that have
right, and does, right.
under a class 2 license?
Well,
So-
and this is not the first time this board has discussed a similar thing. So I think, I know, I certainly don't want to set a precedent. I want to work with this business. I appreciate you coming
Yeah.
before, but I want to do this right. I'm not in favor of just kind of granting the relief. And, I mean, I guess I'm comfortable that we understand the practice that's taking place right now. You're working with the town, so we're all sort of in like an interim period. And I think that we understand that. We understand that there are cars being parked there while we're working through this. If we formally need to grant a temporary relief for a period of time while we sort through this, I'd be in favor of that. But I would not be in favor of kind of just saying yes to this request and then let's figure it out. I think we need to figure this out townwide.
Right, but I guess the question is, you said temporary relief. If we grant relief, I'm assuming we can rescind that grant at any time.
I don't know, that was a late question I had for Christie of, like, again, having not granted zoning relief before, I don't know if that's in perpetuity, related to this business, it can be time framed. I don't know.
Right.
I know we can rescind it if there's violations.
Right.
Well, that's my concern. Like, you know, I mentioned there's shrubbery around it right now, so it's not an unsightly parking lot of broken down cars in the middle of the town. So right now, I'm less concerned about that visual appearance because it's kind of concealed. But next year, if those plants all die and now we have a parking lot of vehicles down there that are in tough shape, what change can we revote this?
Well, based on the way the zoning is worded, It's related to aesthetics as well, so that would be something that I would think could reconsider based on.
Okay.
But if you're just talking about reconsideration because we've investigated it, and I mean,
But the cars aren't taken apart. I mean, they're not, they're just,
Right.
they look
No,
like
we
any, they
understand
look
that.
like any other normal car
Yeah,
parked there.
And appreciate you
Yeah.
working with the town and our
There's- I don't think
departments and
there's-
and providing the additional
don't even work
information
on-
here tonight.
we
That's
don't work-
also very much appreciated.
We don't work on the vehicles anymore. Yeah.
I'm inclined to allow this. I just want a future board to have the ability to reverse it if there's an issue. That, you know, if there's a problem of some sort.
Can I just go back, so you put in 10 on there, is 10 the right number if we went to?
We could do a lesser, yeah, we don't
kind
have
of
to
an
do 10, we
arbitrary
just
number.
don't want it, you know, someone, oh, no, you know, it's just tough because we don't, we
Yeah, I know.
usually, we probably, maybe only once ever, in 9 years had 10 cars, maybe. I'm not even sure if we ever really did.
I mean, I think we definitely want to be reasonable, and like, we do live in the town, and we totally understand concerns, so, I mean, we're definitely, want to be reasonable. So 10, I feel like was an arbitrary number when we were preparing this, just saying, to be on the safe side.
Yeah,
So, I mean, I think whatever everybody kind of thinks is fair, I mean.
Well, if I said 5, is that not enough, or?
yeah, that's fine, I mean, we can deal with that.
6.
I mean, we can work
Think
with
you one
that,
plus
you know.
five?
Okay.
They currently have one.
You have 1, so 5, we went to 6.
6, yeah.
That'd be
Yeah,
okay.
we can work with that.
Just be careful and make sure,
Tell the dealers to come and pick up their.
right?
Yeah, right, well,
Right.
that's a problem, that's,
Yeah.
I don't know if you told them.
Well,
Yes.
yeah, I mean, they have the room for 25 under their lease. To me, 6 is, in spite of the logic that was just applied, just as arbitrary as their 10. So I'd rather give them, I still think we have a fundamental problem here.
Yes.
Because, so with all due respect, I'd rather just sort of not, I will not be voting in favor of a motion to grant the relief specifically because I want to get to the root problem and understand it and then address this specific request.
Well, I think the issue we have here is that I think we have an issue.
Yep.
Today, so we could harm the business by putting this off. So what's come in front of us is that we recognize the issue.
Yep.
And we need to enforce it, which they've come for relief through the zoning. If we don't
Well, we've had,
provide that,
sorry.
then they need to change business practice. So we're trying to work with them. I think now it's been acknowledged. If we do that, I think we're left to go back and say enforce it, no more than 1. I think this is something that they've worked through with the town. To me, personally, I'm in favor of granting it.
We typically stay enforcement. On other matters that have come before this board, we typically don't, we stay enforcement so long as the property owner, the business, or the residents, whomever, is actively working towards a resolution. I guess they've come to us with a resolution.
In conjunction with the town.
In conjunction with the town. So I do agree there's a root issue, but I also understand that fixing this is not in, to use a driving analogy, it's not in our lane, right? It's in the planning board lane, and they're going to need to get this into their cycle and prioritization as they are constantly looking at zoning updates. So we could say, let's stay enforcement till this is resolved. We have no, we might influence or request, but we have no say over how long that might be. And I worry that a stay, becomes its own precedent for some. Let me I walked in the meeting and said, wait a minute, the fee schedule says $100 for the first one and $20 each additional one, and once you have your inspection, it's 2 to 4 weeks to get additional plates, and there isn't necessarily a second inspection. Wasn't aware of the insurance issue and the significant cost there. So I came in saying, we don't need relief because there's an affordable solution. It turns out it's not an affordable solution. And I guess I'm just as uncomfortable with, not enforcing zoning for an extended period of time
So,
when we can provide relief.
so one, excuse me, one option might be, because it is true that when we're working towards something, you stay enforcement. It sounds like even though there's no solution immediately, there could be some questions that could be more immediately answered. So you could push this to a January meeting and allow them to continue until that meeting and get some of your questions answered related to other enforcement. Maybe the town planner or the zoning enforcement officer could give you some additional information. But the bylaw won't change, obviously,
The bylaw-
before then.
Not until March of some year. I'm comfortable with getting additional information. I enter the discussion very uncomfortable with the relief. Additional information, thank you, makes me much more comfortable with it. Still recognizing that, still having concerns about precedent and the broader impact, but then moving, formally requesting that the planning board add this to their queue of zoning updates that they do each annual town meeting. But Shelby, you've got concerns about that, and so if we get additional information, would postponing this to January help allay those concerns?
Well, I mean, I think the owners of the business bring up some interesting information. I don't know the industry, the business practice, so I do think there's, I don't want to penalize them, I want to respect and recognize they're working with the town to, fix a problem, right? So, I recognize that, to Patrick's point, that authorization, is granted so long as no health and safety issues or unsightly vehicle conditions. That's certainly subjective. I will remind this board, we've had some challenges in making those decisions in the past. And so I'm very worried about precedent here. I'd rather just say, kind of handshake. We understand we're all working. We're going to stay the enforcement and understand the playing field that we're actually all in here before we grant the relief. I think it's safer for the town and for this board and for any other board. And it's a pretty public meeting. We all know that everyone's here.
Yeah, no, I don't disagree. I think, personally, I need to be better educated on this. I don't fully understand. You've been running a successful business. This is now a potential, impediment that we don't want to create for you. But I think we do need to understand exactly what this vote means. It's not a typical action that this board takes on a regular basis. So I'm comfortable, I think, as well with sort of leaving it as is while we come back with a better understanding.
So stay enforcement.
So stay.
Does that work for you? Well, if the board stays it, so basically you continue operating as is, as we work through this.
I just think you'd have to go to every single repair shop and do the same thing.
Right.
It's part of doing business. I don't understand.
Yeah, no, so I hear what you're saying,
Yeah.
and what I'm seeing before us is that our zoning bylaw is not reflective of what everyone's doing, right?
Well, we don't know that.
No, that's what
Yeah.
I'm saying. I mean, he's kind of making the case for, this is how business is done. So we either have maybe, I don't know. I don't know when this was last updated. I don't know its tie into Mass General Law. I mean, again, this is just, apologies, but it kind of out of the wheelhouse. And what I don't want to do is set certainly you guys up for failure to harm your business. But also I don't want to then kind of, put undue risk on the town for kind of doing, spot relief, if you will, here, and then creating other problems elsewhere. I just think we, I'm just not, I'm not comfortable. I don't think we have enough information, you guys. It just-
I'm okay with
Yeah, I'm
okay with
concerned that maybe there's something that is something obvious as a town we're not doing that we could be doing that would help everybody who has a body shop in
But
town.
not impede your business while we figure that out.
Right, so
Okay.
we're not enforcing, we're just saying, continue doing what you're doing. You have a lease to park the cars on the lot, you have up to 25, and go forward. And I know you disagree.
No, keep going. I'm
No,
sorry.
that's it. No, I mean,
I just think, as I'm thinking about it, that at a public meeting now, we've basically told people that we're not gonna enforce it. So go and do it while we figure it out, where I think here they've come with an act asking for relief from it because it's been identified. I'd rather grant relief to them and not set precedent saying right here that we wanna go and, I mean, they've done the process, with the town. This is the recommendation that's come back from our, zoning enforcement officer. I'm inclined personally to move forward with that. I absolutely agree with everybody. I think we need more education. One of the things, that I got out of this is, we talked about this, is they're a downtown business. They don't have the storage facility. They've worked with another property owner to kind of lease that property to do it, which keeps that shop in downtown. The way, if I read the bylaws, if you had a big indoor storage facility, you could have 100 unregistered cars in there. We just don't see them. This is about, outdoor storage, as I understand it from the bylaw. So anyways, I think we have work to do, but I think the request has come before us. I just get concerned about saying, hey, we're not gonna enforce it, because then we set a precedent that anybody that comes in violation, we say, we're not gonna enforce it.
so I think that's a great point. I think it's a great point. I guess I would just ask the board that we put a,
Priority.
because now, sort of, once we do this, it sort of is out of our hands a little bit, even though this part of enforcement is in our hands. So I guess I would, if someone is going to make a motion, that I think it should be time restrictive. Like, not forever.
How-
Like,
How long's the current lease for the parking space? For the parking area?
It's a
Roger.
month to month, yeah, it's really month.
well, I was just gonna say, like, until the conclusion of annual town meeting, or some sort of language that puts us responsible for, like, addressing this, and, like, the planning board.
I think it's fair to, aside from this, ask questions, but this board is not responsible for the enforcement of this bylaw. Your only responsibility is to decide whether or not to grant relief based on the bylaw. The zoning enforcement officer is responsible for the enforcement of the bylaw. So, and then the planning board is responsible for bringing forward zoning changes. So I think I can certainly convey the concern to both of those parties, but I don't think that this board is going to be responsible for changing the zoning bylaw or working on the enforcement or anything like that. But I think it's fair to ask the questions of those two entities.
Well, tell you what,
Yeah.
Todd,
That's all right.
No, I was just gonna,
can you just, who you are?
yeah, Todd Alexander, for Fay Mountain Drive in Westborough, but I'm also one of the partners that owns the property. I started off as a customer of Dan's, and to your point, Ian, it's wonderful to have not only a Westborough resident that has a successful business, but from to be downtown here. I can't tell you how many times I've pulled up to his garage door with an issue with my car. One time it stalled out on the Mass Pike and I was afraid to shut it off, pulled up, and he fixed it right then and there. So just having that flexibility and somebody that's local here, it's great. So it's nice to see that the town is working with this, with both Dan and his wife, to try and come to a resolution here. To your point, Shelby, I'm on the ZBA, and I looked at zoning bylaws before I came down here, and I think the intent of, my interpretation was the intent of the zoning bylaw is different than what, it seemed to me like it was more geared towards the sale of vehicles, and that's what they were
the intent was to try and prevent having unregistered vehicles on lots that were trying to be sold. But that's my interpretation of it. I didn't draft the original. I haven't had to enforce it, so, but I think it is something that needs to be addressed. I do think that that will take time. As we all know, any zoning changes take time in town here. The original agreement that I did with Dan was out of space. We had the third floor of, well, we had the whole building vacant at the time with the exception of the bank on the first floor. So I offered to let him use what we have as a supplemental lot for that building. He is using that, he continues to use the lot on a month-to-month basis. Our agreement, however, and I will remind Dan, is that if I get that building fully leased sometime and we need that parking, he is gonna have to find another spot. And I'll feel horrible because, again, he has a great business, and I really am happy to be able to support him in some way. The money's nominal. I mean, it's not a big lease. You guys have seen it. It's really nothing. It's not that much. It doesn't pay for even the taxes for that lot. But
You can't help that.
We're not gonna get in the middle of that.
Yeah. No, I'm not asking you to. But I think that for what they're asking for tonight, they've really, been willing to work with the town, and I kind of, for my own opinion, I do kind of agree with Ian that if you don't enforce it, then other people could try and take advantage of the situation as well. And I know you had some concerns about the shrubbery and stuff. I pay for landscaping there still, and I will continue to do that, so you have my word on that. And if you ever see any issues or have any issues, you can come directly to me too, so.
Tell you what, why don't I make a motion, oops, just lost it here. I move to grant relief from the Westborough zoning bylaw to DSC Auto, which is located at 1 Brigham Street, to park a maximum of 10 unregistered vehicles, inclusive of the one permitted by current zoning at one time in the lot located at 45 East Main Street as permitted by the owner.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, further discussion? Okay, all those in favor? It's 5-0, 5 being present. Thank you.
Thank you.
We usually get around to the right answer.
It takes us a little while.
So, just, Christie, there will be some sort of follow-up and further discussion, like what will the next steps be?
Well, I think it would be helpful if you send me your sort of specific questions. I mean, I hear you, but I think if you have specific questions and concerns, I know that some of the questions, obviously I understand that some of the questions are around enforcement and other repair shops and how this applies to those businesses. I'm also hearing that there's a question, an ask to revisit this bylaw, though I think that is probably will be indicated by how it applies to these other businesses. Because if this is a sort of a standalone issue, or
Yeah.
then I'm not sure how that would apply. So I will talk to the town planner and the zoning enforcement officer, and I will follow up with the board, and we could see if there was further
And maybe there's even an
requests.
education session, because as I continue to read through it, based on what's just said, I mean, it's like, I think it was said by Alan or so, one of my fellow board members earlier, is this bylaw relates to us as individuals. So it covers me that I can't have more than one unregistered
Right.
car or trailer.
Correct.
So the question is, do we actually have appropriate zoning for repair shops? Because what's covered here is if you're a dealer, you can just, to me, it'd be educated.
Yeah.
Maybe it's that it's not changing this bylaw, because I don't want my neighbor to have 16 unregistered cars in his
Right.
yard.
Right,
Which I think part of it is probably that.
Exactly.
I'm sure.
I mean, we don't have anything for
Yep.
repair shops. So,
Yes, I got it.
okay,
Thanks.
perfect.
Amen.
Thank you for the board too. This was unfortunate
Educational.
for the,
Well,
And informative.
yeah.
the business seeking relief, but I think it was good for us, our board, to get.
And I appreciate the conversation, considering the unintended consequences.
Yes.
'Cause sometimes decisions get made. Well, no, sometimes decisions get made and you don't think.
I'm
about
bringing
it.
us back on, so I thought we were gonna be back on, that was my mistake, because I went over that one, I think. So, item 13 is the next one, request for utility easement on Zwicker Farm property at 283234 Belknap Street. And I have to tell you, reading even through this, I was confused, so maybe you can
So-
introduce it.
So we have,
Sorry, I'm waiting for the TV to sign.
yeah, so we have on the phone, Matt from Cataldo Engineering, who wrote the letter that you have in your packet. As you remember, the town purchased the Belknap property. We split the parcel into 3 parts, so that we could create, almost like a funnel-looking parcel, for some access, but also, any potential future easements that would be needed. We received this request, which initially went to the Conservation Commission, actually in the summer, asking if they could exercise an easement for charter through a portion of the land that was actually conveyed to the Conservation Commission. My understanding is that they did have some discussion with the Conservation Commission, but ultimately that piece of land is protected under Article 97, which we've had a lot of discussions about recently. And Town Council has advised that the only way to dig into that parcel would be to get relief from the legislature. So that's a 2/3 vote, I believe, of the legislature to remove those restrictions. And so in order for the town to support that, you would, similar to when we have a charter change, there's an article on town meeting warrant, so the town would need to authorize the board to petition the legislature to remove the restrictions for this purpose. It's very complex, and we've had many discussions about that and how difficult it is to get that type of relief, if the town is even willing to support that relief. So I think he can present the reasons for asking for it and the actual easement. We've talked about whether or not there's an alternative route that can be taken, and I know that they're looking into it because they understand the complexities around this. So
Okay, and maybe it can be addressed in that, but in reading through the packet, the thought that I read that we have an existing utility easement there, and this was gonna go into that for something, not for charter, but.
there's an existing easement with MassDOT that runs through the parcel one of the parcels that's protected. In talking to town council, you can't, because it's already existing, whatever's in the ground can be there, but you can't exercise that easement for future utility because you would be digging into something that's now currently protected under Article 97. I think initially when we first looked at it, we thought if it goes right into that funnel, that would be easier. But that's not where it goes. You can see on the map that that's not where it goes. So, Matt.
So Matt, thank you for being here. Sorry for not calling. Can you hear us?
We're muted. There we go.
Matt, can you hear us?
Now I can.
Oh, perfect. Sorry about that. Apologies.
okay.
Working through the technology piece here. So we've got, you probably didn't hear all the stuff that our town manager just relayed to us, but I'm going to turn it over to you for kind of explanation of the request at hand.
Okay, what Charter is trying to do is provide service to the service area, the Mass Pike service area. And they've looked at other alternatives, and this seems to be the only one. And this easement's on the Zwicker Farm property. It's on the eastern side of it. That easement also carries the sewer service, the water service, and I believe the electric service for the service area. And Charter's looking to just access that same easement with all those other utilities to service the service area. Because I'm not an attorney, I'm just a lowly engineer, but it seems to be that we need town approval through a warrant in the town meeting and also the legislature's approval before, to grant that access to that easement. Is that kind of what you explained, Christie?
Yes, yep.
Perfect. You sound like a lawyer, Matt.
Oh, God. Are there any lawyers on the board?
Not that I know
You're
of.
safe.
Okay, then it's an insult.
Only amateurs.
So this agenda item is an opportunity for the board to understand the request and to ask questions. Because it would have to go on the warrant in March, you would have, that's when you would make your decision about whether or not to place it on the warrant and whether or not you supported it.
Yeah. So I think I am, sorry, just one thing. So I think I understand it. I think as was noted here, I do think I'd want to hear, this board to hear from conservation, because I know there's been discussions there. They own the property that covers this easement. To me, it makes sense from how Matt did it when I looked at the drawing, and that this is a Mass Turnpike utility easement. It seems to make sense, but Chapter 97 land doesn't make sense. So I'd look for some counsel from our Conservation Commission before moving forward, but depending on what comes out of there, to me, I'd be supportive of putting on the warrant from what I know now, but I probably shouldn't even say that because I don't know enough.
Can I just ask about,
And then-
oh, I'm sorry.
Patrick first.
No,
and you.
go ahead, yeah, sorry.
Yeah, my question is, having put underground utilities to my own house, we put futures, future conduit underneath, so we could always pull in new telephone lines, fiber optics, whatever the future held. I'm just curious, these other utilities across the property, is it gonna require a new conduit to be put under, or is there futures already there that could be used to pull the charter line under the ground? Or does it
Wouldn't it be wonderful if there actually was an empty conduit that they could use?
Okay, so there's no availability of any space in existing conduit?
What I've been told that Charter's researched, and there's nothing there.
Okay.
So basically this is a buried conduit, it's cable in conduit. The underground portion's about 350 feet from the utility pole on Belknap to the utility pole that's in the property, which I believe is pretty much the underground part would be all in the field portion.
Mm-hmm.
And then it'll be overhead for utility poles up to the service area.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Shelby.
So I guess one of my questions is, so this is Charter's effort. I presume they're under some sort of contract with the state for this particular project and for some period of time. What happens when and if that agreement ends and Verizon wants to, wins the contract and they don't have an easement?
I don't have an answer for that.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, it's protected land. I'm not aware of.
No, I'm just thinking if we were to grant the easement, then is it oh, today it's Charter and in 10 years it's Verizon, or someone?
Right. What I was going to say is I think it has more to do with how the state lifts or adjusts that Article 97 protection.
Mhm.
I don't know if it would be. I don't really know how that plays out because I've never seen it happen.
Sure.
So.
Well, that would just be one of the questions if we were to support an article being on town meeting, on the warrant. Understanding that wording to me is pretty important because I wouldn't want it to, just be.
Right.
open.
So I think the question would be, how does the state how does the state adjust that protection? And if it's on a case-by-case basis, then that would be different wording than if it was sort of something that they could grant,
Right.
in perpetuity or however they would do it. So yes,
Right.
I think.
Matt, did you say that the line would run underground all the way from essentially the pole on Belknap all the way to the property line for the Mass Pike Terminal?
No, there's a utility pole in the property. I believe it's at the back edge of the field.
Okay.
I have not been boots on the ground out there, but what I've been told from Charter, a pole out there already, so it's just underground from pole to pole, then it'll go up the pole, and then pole to pole out to the service area.
I got it.
Up the, I believe it's a steep incline in that neck of the woods.
Yep.
Yes. I guess, so, looking at the map you provided and then overlaying it with the terrain map from Google Maps, it looks like about, somewhere between 45 and 55% is the field. The rest of the path is in the woods. I believe the small, where you're showing the easement hitting the property line, there's a small building there. I believe that was part of the cleanup effort.
I believe it is as
And-
well.
and so
I
look-
have
and
seen
look-
on
and
the
looking-
plan.
And so that is in the woods now, so I'm worried about the woods being disturbed, if it has to be dug up. And I guess the question is, does Charter service the Mass DOT research facility?
I
And,
don't believe they do, because the service road that comes along parallel to the pike, I don't know what road it comes off of. That's a pathway that they looked at, and I don't know their lingo. What I've read and heard is they can only have X amount of boosters with a length of line, and they're already at a max of that booster. So they can't access down that access road. We would love to do that, trust me, because we've been working on this for a while, just trying to get
right,
the understanding.
unless they added power and added another booster.
Yeah, I don't, that's above my pay grade.
So this is
I'm a civil
less
engineer,
expensive.
I'm not a charter engineer.
This is less expensive, but that is doable.
But I do not anticipate any of the woods being disturbed at all, because once they're at the poles, then it's gonna be pole to pole with lines that are already there.
Right, but they're gonna have to trench 2 feet wide and through.
It's smaller than that. Foot. They put a foot
No,
bucket on
it actually said a 2
Did it
foot
say
bucket.
2 foot?
2 foot bucket.
So
On it.
it would be helpful to understand what are the other options. This is rhetorical, Matt, at this point, because I don't know that you have this information, wouldn't expect you to in hand. What are the other options that they are pursuing?
There are no other physical ways to get there within, I think, probably budgetary reasons. I don't know that for sure, but again, this would be a 12-inch wide bucket going down 12, 18 inches deep. The cable is in the conduit, so it's a quick lay it down, backfill it, and reseed it. Like I said, I believe the vast majority, if not all of the digging part, would be in the field. So after a growing season, you wouldn't even know anything was done out there.
Yeah, I mean, I'm less, I understand the trenching part and the covering it over, but that's sort of the easy part. It's the Chapter 97 part that's
Exactly.
that's complex. So and I guess as a board member, before I would support an article, I would want to understand. I mean, this reminds me almost of the Eversource gas line discussion we had a long time ago.
Yeah.
And it was like, this is the route that we must take. This is the only route. It was like, well, what about this route? Oh, well,
It costs more.
it costs more. Well, tell us more about that. So I've heard the request. I'm not inclined to I'd like to understand what the other options are.
The other options from them.
Yeah, from Charter, I think that if Charter is asking the board to in the town to, and in the state legislature, talk about expense, to go through all these hoops, I think that it's incumbent upon Charter to demonstrate why the others' options are not viable.
Yeah, and I still want to hear from conservation too,
Yeah.
if they've
Yeah.
looked at it.
Yeah,
It's
totally
their land,
appropriate.
it's not our land.
Yeah.
We don't have any control over
Are you gonna sing?
it. No, you don't want that.
And we do understand that if we're in the buffer zones, we would have to file with conservation. I'm not aware of any plans that show I know there's wetlands on property, I just don't know exactly how close they are to this easement.
I think beyond that, though, the question is, because that portion of the property is under the care and control of the Conservation Commission.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely, understood.
And there's still an area of concern where the remediation wells were.
Yeah.
And this appears to go through that area.
Right.
So
So if
which
the
adds to
board
the
was
complexity.
inclined, I think once you get a couple answers to some of these questions, if you're inclined to move forward, we're definitely going to have to understand that piece of it.
Okay.
Okay. Any other questions, or it sounds, I think we understand it, more to come, and we'll figure out next steps. Matt, thank you very much.
All right, any other questions?
I think we're good.
That's it. Thanks.
All right, thank you. Have a
Thank
good
you.
evening.
Okay, you too. Okay, I think that covers everything, and I'm 2 minutes late, I'm almost back on track. Town manager's report. Gotta go with 3 minutes, not 5.
Okay. The position of Veteran Services Director is currently vacant following the resignation of Justin Sousa on November 28th. So this is a Central Mass Veterans District position and will be filled by the district board, of which Kim represents Westborough on. In the interim, the district has appointed an interim VSO who is available to assist any veterans in need of help. He's actually serves as a veterans agent in a neighboring town. Any veterans who are seeking services or that have questions can contact the district, and we have the phone number here, or you can contact our office and we can help connect you to the interim director. But they are also working through interviews at this time, so looking to get that position filled. Related to regional dispatch, the town managers and select board chairs from Grafton, Hopkinton, Southborough, and Westborough met to discuss moving forward in the grant process for the regional dispatch center. So we're working to develop an IMA for each town's consideration in preparation for that grant application. And just as a reminder, that grant is due, I think, March 2nd. I have to vacuum. Town meeting and form of government, as I have, or as all of you have, I think, our office has received a lot of questions and feedback related to town meeting and the open town meeting form of government since the October town meeting and also the last Saturday's town meeting. So this is just a comment that the board might want to consider an agenda item at an upcoming meeting to debrief the most recent town meetings with the moderator and consider next steps. And then the FY24 budget, which we are working diligently on, will be available to the board and the public no later than Tuesday, December 22nd, or 21st, sorry.
Some all-nighters?
What's that?
Don't pull some all-nighters to get
We
done?
are, Wednesday. I can't take any days away from me. I think we're gonna get done sooner, but I shouldn't say that. For department updates, the COVID-19 continues to rise due to Thanksgiving gatherings, which was expected. The health department continues to have free COVID-19 test kits offered throughout the town hall, library, senior center, and the food pantry. On November 17th, after receiving a complaint, the health department and the Tobacco Control Coalition conducted a compliance check at Vape City, located at 135 Turnpike. It was initiated due to the receipt of an anonymous complaint. A corrections cease and desist order was given to the owner, who was found to be in violation of the state law entitled An Act to Modernize Tobacco Control. During the compliance check, approximately $40,000 worth of illegal product that was stored in the back room was located. The owner admitted to selling the products and has been fined $1,000 and received a suspension of the tobacco license for 3 days. The amount of illegal product confiscated meets the criteria of criminal charges with the DOR.
So just to be clear, so 3-day suspension and then potential charges?
Yeah, so they're going to be working with so DOR would move forward with that.
But they can still operate, I mean, I just happen to notice that they're still open, and obviously it's well past those 3 days.
Right,
So they
right.
can still do the risks.
That's my understanding.
Okay, thanks.
Community development, on November 2nd, the EDC issued $17,500 in grants to 5 businesses, 4 new ones and 1 expansion through its business assistant grant program. We held the winter stroll on November 27th with lots of business participation. On November 22nd, the EDC held an ambassador outreach meeting with Marvel on 8 Technology Drive. We also launched the Shop Westborough Holiday Passport promotion, which is a loyalty program that's going on through the end of the month. On December 5th, the staff sent a letter to the businesses that received the temporary permit for the outdoor seating, reminding them that they have to initiate that permanent process. So as a reminder, the board granted continued use of that temporary outdoor seating as long as they were working towards compliance at the end of this month. And then that would expire under the current governor's orders in April. On December 6th, staff applied for the Regional Economic Development Organization, which is the REDO grant for a pop-up project jointly with the town of Acton. On December 8th, the Economic Assistance Coordinating Council approved our vacant storefront program, awarding Wayback Burgers $7,500 in refundable tax credits. On December 8th, community development staff joined the Metro West Partnerships recently formed Planning and Economic Development Working Group. There's lots of activity here. Several businesses that received support from the EDC opened recently, including Main Street Pastries and More, and Cha Cha and Beans. On December 14th, the Conservation Department will be hosting a Massachusetts Society of Municipal Conservation Professionals brown bag in the Great Hall. And the community development has finally launched its website, which can be found on the town's webpage. They were working to create an actual community development department website as opposed to the individual websites prior to them being one consolidated department. The Department of Public Works, the final reports for the Harvey Building and Country Club assessments will be received in January. And so we'll bring that back to the board. Those are the building assessments that were funded at a previous town meeting. Completion of the Fruit Street Bridge replacement project will be delayed by several months due to necessary design changes. So now its anticipated completion is the fall of '23. The DPW received a $10,000 Maya grant to fund the purchase of safety equipment associated with subsurface sewer pump stations. The Finance Department's been working with the DOR to set the tax rate, which they had to wait until after the town meeting, as you remember. The process is finished, is moving forward. They have to create the bills. And then we want to extend our appreciation to Bob Haley, the town's treasurer collector, who has been working in municipal government for over 35 years and will retire in the end of December. There's several grants listed from our grants department that we have been awarded in several different departments. There's also a listing of some recent RFQs and IFBs that have gone out for bidding and what the awards were for that. In the fire department, they received a grant of $18,642 on December 7th to replace 4-inch firefighting supply hose on 2 engines. The fire department's also seen an uptick in kitchen fires over the last several months due to combustibles being stored on stovetops. So residents are reminded to keep storage of combustibles away from cooking appliances and make sure you have working smoke detectors. On November 29th, the department witnessed an accomplishment by one of our employees for the first time in our history. Firefighter Emmanuel D'Souza was sworn in at Mechanics Hall in Worcester as an American citizen. So the department is very proud of him and look forward to his continued success. On December 7th, Corey Anderson was promoted to the rank of lieutenant. He'll be before the board soon to be sworn in. The planning board continues public hearings for the Hyundai dealership. They also opened a public hearing for Stone Inc. at 80 Turnpike Road. There's a new 3-lot subdivision proposed for 48 Flanders Road. The Master Plan Implementation Committee continues to meet. We met last night. Police Department, the vehicle utilized by the K-9 program, which was provided by Central Mass Regional Homeland Security Council, is nearing the end of its service. And at the monthly meeting on December 6th, a replacement vehicle was voted and approved. So the vehicle is fully equipped by CMRPC and has a total cost of $71,871. And then Chief Laurie will be sworn in as president of the Central Mass Police Chiefs Association tomorrow. Busy.
Okay, issues and correspondence of the board. Patrick, I want to start with you.
I guess I just had a question about if I brought this topic up before in regards to the parking downtown, to open a hearing in regards to the 1 hour parking limits in the downtown area. So something I'm hopeful the board would like to look into.
Can I ask, is that part of the larger, like, parking, wayfinding, and, or is it specific to the 1 hour parking?
It was specific, but I will just say that, you know, if there's a logic to having it as part of a bigger conversation, I'm not sure what's appropriate in regards to requiring a hearing and how specific that hearing would have to be, but,
So I was going to say, if that's something that you're interested in, it would be helpful to understand what type of information you're looking for in terms of making a decision and what you would be specifically considering, because it does need to be noticed at that time and advertised in the newspaper.
So should we put it on, debate it here, put it on, I know you brought it up before, but a discussion as an agenda item to discuss?
sure, and then see if it's something we want to have a hearing for?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's fine.
And what else we need?
Yeah, I don't understand all the nuances of it, so I certainly would be interested in educating myself and what the steps are and what are the appropriate entities we need to get to talk with, whether it's businesses or town departments and whatnot.
So we can work on that to get it on agenda.
And Christie brought up master plan. We met the other night, great meeting, 2 hours, broke out into subcommittees and did a lot of great work, kind of level setting the committees. Obviously a lot of work on the master plan, a lot of different actions, so just understanding what they are and getting the whole team up to the kind of the same space.
Great, Alan.
Okay, so the Westborough Affordable Housing Trust has been focused on the property at 3 Baylor Avenue. The property has been cleared out. We want to thank the DPW for grooming the front yard to get us through the winter. That was greatly appreciated. Additionally, Habitat for Humanity came in and did a structural walkthrough of the building and found that several of the load-bearing walls don't have studs. It's plywood behind paneling. And so, and given the amount of asbestos, given that all of the exterior shingles are asbestos and all of the floors are asbestos, the trust is expecting that this is going to be a tear down and rebuild. And we'll work obviously with the planning board and zoning and code enforcement, what we can do by right and what would require any additional variances. But the trust is actively working on an RFP to identify a developer to acquire the property and build a affordable home with approximately the same footprint on that property. That's moving forward. Our current hope is that the RFP would be fully ready, reviewed by council with draft purchase and sale agreement attached to reference late January, early February, and move forward with that. So that's what's happening there.
Great.
I've also been contacted about parking downtown and actually started playing with a map and color coding what hours are allowed where so far and what could change, so I'm happy to share that with you.
We do have a study.
All right, you beat me in,
We have a study.
Okay, Sean.
Yeah, I would just like to thank everybody who showed up on Saturday for a special town meeting. It was an impressive turnout for the town, whether you were for or against. I'd say most people were there for Article 1. And I want to thank everybody who had their voices heard. And when I was there, realized that there were multiple reasons that people were voting against the library project. One was the process that had been taken to try and have a revote of the article. Two was the price of the project and how it had skyrocketed following COVID. And then also third was folks who had an issue with the project itself, either the location or the size and things of that nature. The library building committee met today, and we're, going to begin reevaluating. So if folks have thoughts, we'll be coming back out, and the thought is, should there be an article at the annual town meeting with whatever the next step may be for the library in its current state, or is there a separate future state that folks are interested in? So we've restarted that process and just wanted to let folks know. Thank you.
Sean? Shelby?
Yeah, a couple quick updates. One is the Hakamaka Reuse Committee will be meeting tomorrow. We're in light of the regional dispatch opportunity that this board is aware of, and that was also presented to the committee. We're moving forward with sort of developing our recommendations for the use of the property to accommodate both that dispatch as well as a passive recreation and potential solar capabilities. So that's sort of where the discussion will go, and kind of formulate our thoughts. And then we would have to work with a licensed site provider like Ty and Bond to actually develop a work plan that would then have to be approved by the state, et cetera, for any actual development. So that's sort of the next area of focus of work, and I would anticipate a couple meetings worth of work before we have a formal document ready to be kind of considered, just so we can even price out the work of Ty and Bond. And then just want to let the community know that, I know the board is aware of this, but Congregation B'nai Shalom is having a Hanukkah celebration on the 18th, Sunday, at 4:30 p.m., and that is open to the community. So just want to let folks know that is going on. It's on East Main Street. And just in closing, unfortunately closing on a bit of a sad note, but did want to acknowledge the passing of Jim Driscoll. Jim was 77 years old. He leaves behind his wife Mary of 54 years, and his children Jimmy and Michelle were steadfast rocks for Mary and Jim during his time of health over the past couple months. For those that know Jim, he served for many years on the Finance Committee, and I was always sort of impressed by the twinkle in his eye and some of the comments he would make that were pointed and sharp, but he had a great sense of humor, and I know he will be missed by many, and appreciate his years of service. His service is, the wake was tonight and the service is tomorrow, so just want to acknowledge his good life. And that's all.
Thanks, Shelby. I said a few things. Capital Expenditures Planning Committee, over the past month, I guess, we've been meeting as a committee and have wrapped up our work and recommendations, which you'll see in the budget book. As folks know, we're continuing to improve and get better. Thanks to Kim for her guidance there in the committee, but you'll see the output of the work done by that committee as the budget books come out. Trustees of Soldiers Memorial met last week as well. A few things we're working on. We're working with the school department on design of a new Veterans Memorial at the new cemetery, the Nurse Street Cemetery. So kind of the graphic design, students and whatever, engaging them in the process of designing a memorial, and that will, over time, come up with costs, et cetera, to, and part of the cost of that is, or I think all of the cost of that was included in the money that's been already appropriated for that cemetery. We're also in the midst and working with David Nurse in terms of planning the kind of dedication ceremony for the new memorial that's up at Minuteman Park that he really spearheaded, brought it to us as a board, came to we deferred it to Trustees of Soldiers Memorial, worked with him, and if folks haven't seen it, it is up in place right now, but sometime this spring we'll be doing a formal dedication of that. And just what we talked about in the meeting, but there is a open position for a non-veterans member up at town election for the trustees. So throwing that out there for anybody that may be interested in that position, a 3-year position. Chris, I had a question, just any updates we have on repair work? I know we talked about the country club building design, but I also know we had the work being done on insurance. Is that ongoing, started, or is that waiting for?
So they've just recently started the work related to the insurance. With the assessment being completed in January, we're sort of working with the contractor to understand the needs as identified by the assessment consultant. Luckily, that's actually the same consultant, so we can so they're aware of the work going on with the insurance as well as the assessment. So there's more to come on that in the coming weeks.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then what are I'm assuming we'll have an RFP coming up soon for the lease of the restaurant?
Yeah, so we're looking to understand the timeline so that we can, when we put it out, we can make people aware of an anticipated time that they would assume the lease. And so we'll understand that better in January.
Perfect. Then one final thing on my side is that my term expires. My current term as select board member expires this year. I have gone ahead and pulled papers, and I'm getting them signed. So I am announcing here that I am intending to run for another term, but encourage folks for all the open positions, including this one, if people are interested, to pull papers from the town clerk's office, and encourage folks to, if it's something that interests them, to run for office. It's got its good, its bad, and its ugly, but mostly good, and I think it's something I've enjoyed and look forward to running for a additional term. That's all I had.
And I forgot one item, just
Okay.
more, I think you're aware of it, but just for the board's awareness that at a future meeting, I think next 1 or 2 meetings, we'll be talking about the composition of the Community Preservation Committee that we need to form, and that ultimately we need to bring forward a bylaw change at town meeting. So be providing some information to the board with a recommendation for that composition. So just FYI.
Perfect, thank you for that. Okay. Motion for executive session?
I move to enter into an executive session under Mass General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 21A3, to discuss strategy with respect to collective bargaining with the following unions: DPW Clerical Patrol. Under Mass General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 21A3, to discuss strategy with respect to litigation regarding Ferris Development Group, LLC, versus Chabaco Hill Capital Partners, LLC, versus Town of Westborough, Lax Media LLC, and Lax Media MA LLC, Worcester Superior Court, case number 2285CV01281. Under Mass General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 21A3, with respect to litigation regarding residences of Westborough Station, Northland TPLP LLC at 100 Charlestown Meadows Drive, enforcement of affordable housing, and under Mass General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 21A7, to act under the authority of the Select Board to approve executive session minutes of October 3rd, October 26th, and November 2nd, all of 2022.
I declare that an open meeting would have a detrimental effect on the board's bargaining and litigating position, and the board will not be reconvening in an open session at the conclusion of this executive session. Do I have a second to the motion?
Second.
Okay, roll call vote.
Welch, yes.
Edinburgh, yes.
Johnson, yes.
Keo, yes.
Marshall, yes.
We are in executive session. And
And
thank
thank
you,
you.
Westborough TV. Beat you to it.